On the 21st of July 2026, an account called American Libertarian commented this on my Wolfenstein the New Colossus video.
We get a glimpse of the good ending before it gets taken down by progressive activists.
American Libertarian is referencing how the New Colossus shows us a world where the Second World War ends with the Nazis winning and conquering the United States. It's a very edgy joke about how Nazi victory would be the good ending. A day later, this guy, Slay1337PL, left a comment saying,
Nazis is when America has clean streets.
It's another very edgy joke that references how idyllic Wolfenstein's Roswell looks under Nazi control. Slay1337PL is ignoring the purposeful satire and alluding to how a totalitarian government would keep the streets clean of all sorts. Litter, rats, certain types of people.
Jews are running society, women need to shut the fuck up, blacks need to be imprisoned for the most part, and we would live in paradise. It's that simple.
My videos on Wolfenstein were flooded with comments like these. Jump over to my New Order one where I break down that Nazis are weird and we find more. Burner Jones wrote,
If by weird you mean good and correct, then yes.
Very edgy joke there where Burner Jones is just outright saying that Nazis are history's good guys. Another account, Falconerism, hopped on with a very edgy riff on the video's title.
Big-nosed people are weird.
He thought, typed and didn't delete. Falconerism is talking about Jewish people. He hasn't said that because typing the word Jew might get his comment flagged, so he swapped it for a stereotype everyone will recognize instead. He won't name the people, so he reaches for the abstraction. He turns a human being into a shape, a nose, a category, an idea, because the idea is easier to hate than the person. If that sounds familiar, it's because it's the exact move my last two videos spent 4 hours taking apart. It's the whole engine of the thing that these people are cheering for. Anyway, it's not just very edgy, it's very clever too. Jumping back to my New Colossus video, an account called John Diaper commented to say,
Based America.
In case you're watching this in the future, the word based is current internet slang, popularized by the rapper Lil B. It means something's cool, that you approve of it. When John says based America, he's either approving of Wolfenstein's Nazi-conquered United States or of the litany of real, documented American crimes against humanity that I laid out in that video. Very edgy, very cool. Notably, all of these very edgy comments relied on internet speak and not one of them was remotely original.
Sure, bro. Enjoy your goy slop of a game that spreads Jewish propaganda.
Writes TH69571. 2-hour Goyim Copium, adds Andreas Sewell 7413. Falconerism returns to reply to that comment with,
Based king. Keep it up, man.
I guess his AI girlfriend was broken that day. Goyslop welds goy, a Hebrew and Yiddish word for non-Jewish people, to slop, an overused term for junk food media. Stuff that's low quality but gives you comfort. It began as a conspiracy theory, the belief that Jewish elites purposefully feed low quality food to non-Jews to weaken them. In his book, Everything You Love Will Burn, Vegas Tennell describes a moment where he witnessed two white supremacists debating it. It's soy, said Matthew. Soy increases your estrogen and the packaged stuff you get at Walmart usually has high levels of soy in it. No wonder men aren't acting like men anymore when we're pumping estrogen into ourselves. It's science. Now hold on there, said Tom. I'm eating the same stuff everyone else does and I ain't feminine. Maybe it's when you get saved or something. It washes all of that dadgum feminine soy out of your system. The word has now transcended that conspiracy theory and snowballed into an anti-Semitic slur used by very edgy people who think that because it's lesser known, it makes them harder to call out. I got a lot of comments talking about Goyslop. I think it's interesting that none of these comments, not a single one, said anything substantial.
Keep your shit politics out of analysis.
Blue Gaming Rage roars from his keyboard, responding to a video that, by design, didn't talk about 21st century politics. For some people, that absence was so disorienting that they started arguing with a video that didn't exist.
Trump is not a Nazi. Sorry.
Nemo VQ6BK writes, despite the fact Trump isn't mentioned once in either of those videos, there's a hollowness to all of it. No insight, no perspective, no detail or depth. Each comment is, quite literally, a waste of time to read. Nothing is gained, no argument furthered for anybody. All that's left are vacuous references or very edgy jokes. And it is the same hollowness that you will find in Wolfenstein Youngblood. Releasing in 2019, it's a very edgy shell of a video game with very little to say. It wears the costume of Wolfenstein without understanding it. It doesn't deepen the conversation, it doesn't chew on its characters and world, it doesn't even let you have fun. Instead, it's a victim of the live service bandwagon. Don't take it from me, take it from Machine Games co-founder Jörg Gustafsson. Speaking to PlayStation Magazine, he said, "Players will be able to stay in the game for a long time. We'll add additional side missions and new challenges once the campaign is completed. There's a lot more activities and side missions that you can do in Wolfenstein Youngblood than in previous Wolfenstein games. Much to its detriment, it's a game explicitly designed to make you stay in it for a long time, even if that time is spent slurping up coins or grinding. Playtime is the focus, a good time isn't. It's a game that grifts, so I'm going to take it apart. The combat, the grind, the co-op, the part where I emptied an entire assault rifle into a man's head and he stood there wondering what my problem was. You are getting all of it. I have played 40 hours of this thing and somebody is going to hear about it. But that's not why we're here. Because Wolfenstein Youngblood doesn't matter. Nobody played it, nobody defends it. Nobody is waiting for the sequel. It's a bad game that I've already uninstalled. The rest of it, though, can't be uninstalled. The comments under my last two videos, whoever taught those people the words, whoever taught them, and whoever is sitting at the top taking the money. All of it was there before Youngblood, and it will outlast it. And unlike Youngblood, it matters. As I prepared for this video, I realized that I've got some shit to say, not all relevant to Wolfenstein, but certainly relevant to the comments left on my videos covering it. Before, we stayed in the past. This time, I'm focused on the present. If you haven't seen my other videos, you're fine. This stands on its own. But they're where I did the work that this one is built on. The New Order asked what BJ was fighting against. The New Colossus asked what he was fighting for. This one asks what's left. This is a video about edge, hate, and the machine that runs on both. This is not a video about Wolfenstein Youngblood. In my New Order video, I argued that mockery is the best weapon we've got against fascism. Ridicule starves it because it can't survive being absurd. I still think that's true, but it's important to note that the joke works both ways. The Daily Stormer, a neo-Nazi website, had its style guide leaked in 2017. That guide explicitly instructed writers to keep the tone light and jokey so that outsiders couldn't tell whether the hate they spewed was serious. Under the subheading, Lulz, the site's founder, Andrew Anglin, wrote, "The unindoctrinated should not be able to tell if we are joking or not. Packing our message inside of existing cultural memes and humor can be viewed as a delivery method. Something like adding cherry flavor to children's medicine. Dehumanization is extremely important, but it must be done within the confines of lulz." The Daily Stormer isn't alone in relying on edgy or ironic jokes to make its bile easier to swallow. Edge is a gap held open on purpose between what's said and what's meant. It's aesthetic first, unless you hide in the aesthetic. It's cringe that relies on being cringeworthy. It takes a three-dimensional belief and flattens it. The same can be said for Youngblood's characters.
Can I take the shot?
Situation like this, you need to pay attention to your surroundings.
Liberated America, 1980. BJ Blazkowicz's dream is still drenched in violence and war. After the events of the New Colossus, the American resistance beat back the Nazis and has started to rebuild. The Reich might be diminished, but it still controls Europe, so BJ and his wife Anya are training their daughters, Sophie and Jess. This scene harbors the game's strongest writing. It feels like it was scripted by someone else. BJ's a patient mentor, teaching Jess to take in her surroundings and feel the world around her. It's foreshadowing for a future twist, and sets up a character arc that she sadly never capitalizes on. Anya is a hard taskmaster. Sophie gets exhausted during a sparring match, and she pushes her. Tells her that to survive is to embrace suffering, stand up and carry it. Two parents with two different parenting styles, informed by the fantastic characterization we got in the New Order and the New Colossus. BJ understands the importance of patience, and Anya understands how to carry suffering. Jess and Sophie are battered by that comparison. They're impossible to differentiate. In fact, I keep forgetting which one is which. You might think that that's because they're twins. They're later nicknamed the Terror Twins when the Nazis learn that they're Billy's kids, but that setup isn't an excuse for how shapeless these husks are. At the start of the game, you pick a sister to play as, and once your choice is locked in, you can't change it at any point. Not that it matters, they're identical in every way, but it seems like a weird choice. Sophie's blonde and Jess has dark hair. Sophie is an aspiring writer with her head in the clouds, and Jess exists. They're both big fans of the Kenneth and Arthur books, a fictional series that they constantly, repeatedly, unrelentingly reference, but take that away and they are barely characters. It's unclear how old they're supposed to be. The wiki says that they're 18, but they talk about high school bullies like they met them last week. The quips belong to 10-year-olds. The book series that they're obsessed with sounds like an homage to the famous Five or Secret Seven, novels aimed squarely at kids aged 7 and up. There's no inner or outer conflict, a bit of drama, a bit of difference in how they see the world. They never disagree, they never exhibit flaws, and every line out of their mouth is cringe personified. Nothing lets them breathe because the achingly thin plot is thin on character beats too, so all you're left with is elevator loading screens where they dance or spook each other. How did that scare you? There are only 2 of you in this lift and you know she's there. Cringe and irony are how Youngblood leads into its edginess. Jess and Soph are dorky sweethearts, teenage girls covered in gore, swearing unconvincingly as they snort through their nose and kill the blandest Nazis in machine games history. Everything is a game, detached by degrees of separation. Jess and Soph live in a world where the horror is always one layer down under a cherry-flavoured joke. Their first kill is played as a laugh. They keep asking each other if they're scared. Sophie even cries just before she massacres a soldier. But then bam! His head pops and they yell about how awesome it is before throwing up. Ho ho ho, what an edgy joke. Here, Nazis aren't monsters to slay, an enemy to be mocked, or people to be disturbed by. They're set up for the punchline that is Jess and Soph's warped playfulness. It's an aesthetic first, and after the opening scene, that carries into the rest of the cast as well. It says nothing, so you can't engage with it.
How do you think Jews would portray Nazis? They have lied about them for a century now. This is just another one of their fever dream fantasies.
In 2021, a French YouTuber called Papacito put out a now-banned video with the title, "Is Leftism Bulletproof?" He and a mate get dressed up in paramilitary gear, stand a mannequin in a field, slap a t-shirt on it that marks it out as a lefty, a communist, a Mélenchon voter, and then, for the bit, for the laugh, they blow its head off with a shotgun and go at it with a machete. Ha ha. 6% of the country, he muses, might find themselves helpless if something unforeseen were to happen. He carves out time to explain where you'd buy the gun he uses. It is Jess and Soph's first kill played completely straight. The giggle, the mess, the body. When the prosecutor came knocking, he used memes as a shield. It's just a joke. You can't prove I meant it. Vegas Tenold's book, Everything You Love Will Burn, is going to pop up a few times in this video. It documents years where Vegas followed this man, Matthew Heimbach, also known as the Little Führer. Heimbach tried to pull together various white supremacist factions into one united front. It's not just a brilliant look at hate groups, but it also reads like a thriller. Vegas shows Matthew's diabolical side, but also his understanding of how to recruit effectively. At one point, the Little Führer says, "This last year saw over 1 billion anti-Semitic impressions per month online. We won the meme war. Ours is a youth movement. It's against political correctness, democracy, and equality, and it's building." Memes are funny because they make you tell the joke. You're forced to find the punchline, and that means your version of the punchline is personal to you. Surprised Pikachu, condescending Wonka, grumpy cat. You exaggerate the surprise because of the picture. You voice the cat. You pick the comic timing. They are goddamn classics. But at some point, memes stopped being funny and started being mascots. Wojak belongs to the incels, NPC shared by a bunch of people to reference groupthink, where you don't question anything. The most important mascot, though, the one that started all of this, is Pepe the Frog.
It's Pepe's become kind of a symbol.
He was co-opted by white supremacists, now belonging to incels, racists, freaks, and losers. But because the picture itself wasn't offensive, he's just a frog, there wasn't anything explicit to call out. very edgy. This style of meme, the style Matthew Heimbach claimed to let them win a war, is purposefully ugly. They look like they were drawn in MS Paint. Any photographs used are low quality. That's partly so that online extremism can pretend that they're counterculture, but it's mostly so that the images make you cringe when you look at them. None of them are pleasing to the eye. It adds to the apparent comedy. It's grubby. It's gross-out humor slobbered all over real hatred. These memes have become less like jokes and more tribal banners. Oh, you're using Pepe? Sick, man. You must be one of us. This is nothing new. In 1981, Lee Atwater, a GOP strategist, confessed that extremist dialogue had evolved. You start out in 1954 by saying, by 1968, you can't say that. It hurts you. It backfires. So you say stuff like forced busing, states' rights, all that stuff, and you're getting so abstract. Now you're talking about cutting taxes, and all these things you're talking about are totally economic things, and a byproduct of them is blacks get hurt worse than whites. We want to cut this is much more abstract than even the busing thing, and a hell of a lot more abstract than saying. But in recent years, Edge has changed, hasn't it? Previously, it was all about the gap between what's said and what isn't said, the suspension of disbelief. The fact he can't prove the real meaning without writing paragraphs about a meme's all-important context. People woke up to what Pepe the Frog represents, so it wasn't edgy for you to share him anymore. You had to go bigger. You had to turn Pepe into drawings of Adolf Hitler. Lee Atwater's cycle reversed itself, inevitably coming right back to the words he wanted to use and cartoons depicting murder. But once the Anti-Defamation League is putting your meme in a hate symbol database and your granny has seen it on the news, the frog stops doing the job. The whole point was that you were in on something they didn't get, and now everyone gets it. You need a new frog, and Nick Fuentes' crowd found one. A fatter, uglier cartoon called Groiper. A toad with its chin resting smugly in its hands. Undecoded, fresh, theirs. And his followers named themselves after it. If you haven't had the displeasure, Nick Fuentes is a live streamer who runs a show called America First, and the Groipers are the online army that forms around him. Fuentes is fluent in edge and irony, except his edginess comes from how disgusting he can be. Hitler is cool, he said on Rumble. But what is it about Hitler that's cool? Why does it tickle? Kids love Hitler. Young men see the edits of him speaking. It's edgy, it's transgressive. There's something that feels naughty and dark about it, but there's also something electrifying about it. So why is it cool? It's simple. What Hitler represents is if white people didn't give a fuck. I'm reading you Fuentes' words rather than playing a clip because he never finishes a goddamn thought without a side tangent or diatribe. He starts explaining why he thinks Hitler is cool and then goes on a ramble about how white people are the villains in TV shows and movies before coming back to his thought. After watching him for hours, I can't tell if that's a tactic or because he has the attention span of a toddler. Fuentes had a televised debate with Piers Morgan about his very edgy views and jokes. During that interview, Fuentes saw Daniel Finkelstein, whose grandmother died in the Holocaust. Fuentes mocked the idea, said he didn't care, and after the Morgan interviews, his freaky little fans started releasing AI-generated songs titled "Me Mum Died in the Holly." The lyrics mock Finkelstein and victims of the Holocaust. Fuentes and his fans aren't hiding behind memes anymore. They just don't give a fuck. And the newest evolution of Fuentes' brand of edge isn't a meme, it's AI slop. After the Morgan interview, the Groipers didn't sit down and make anything. Nobody recorded that song or drew a cartoon. They fed the idea into a generator and let the machine spew. You don't need to be funny anymore. You don't need to be subversive or clever or even know how to hold a pencil. You need an account and a prompt. The wit that Anglin's whole method depended on, the cherry flavor, the joke that makes the poison go down, the machine does it all now for free. Edge has decayed all the way down to this. Thinking that's funny shows an abject lack of critical thinking or contextual awareness of what you're talking about. For some reason, when I see Nick Fuentes smirking as he pretends he doesn't know how many Jews died in the Holocaust, I'm reminded of how my son laughs when I tell him not to touch the stove.
Fuck yeah! You guys are weird.
There are a legion of issues with the game's setup, mainly stemming with how many major events have happened off-screen. It turns out that years ago, BJ killed Adolf Hitler. Since then, he's apparently grown moody and distant. Now, he's vanished and hasn't told anyone where he's going. The girls are in the dark, Anya's worried sick, so old friend Grace Walker comes by to see if she can help. The game never justifies BJ's disappearance. It's explained, poorly, but it's never justified. Even when the credits rolled, I couldn't get over the fact that BJ left without telling his wife where he's going. The new Colossus basically turned that idea into a joke, where in the space of 60 seconds, he decides to keep a secret from Anya and then immediately crumbles the next time he sees her. Honesty and transparency are foundational to their love story. Grace Walker is now the head of the FBI. 20 years after the new Colossus, she's swatted her belief system and turned into a woman who works for the man, capital T, capital M. Grace was a revolutionary, an anarchist. It's an unnatural place for her to end up. Instead, her rebellious streak is treated like a phase that has been passed on to her super genius daughter, Abby. That might explain why she joins the twins when they run off to Paris to track down BJ. Jörg Gustafsson tried to explain the game's tone when he spoke to Easy Allies. Quote, "The story is a little bit lighter in tone because this story is built from love. Anya and BJ have raised their daughters with love. It contrasts the new Colossus where we see how BJ was brought up by his parents and his abusive father. We wanted to tell a story about the transition from adolescence to adulthood. The 80s time period was a consequence of that because of how old BJ's daughters would be. I love this as a direction. That contrast is clever, if it's harnessed, explored, or even referenced. One of Youngblood's issues is how thin its narrative is. There are only a handful of story-driven scenes in the game, and hardly any character-driven dialogue during gameplay. It chugs to dump exposition on you as quickly as possible because the setup is dense, but our heroes and villains aren't. When you finally boot the thing up, a lighter story built on love feels like an excuse for a story that never takes itself seriously. It breaks that all-important machine game style that was already creaking in the new Colossus, that jokes can be turned into serious moments, but serious moments can never be turned into jokes. Later, Abby loses her eye in a fight, and for a beat, it seems like she might be dead. Wow, that's pretty serious. But immediately, the game rips the piss out of the situation by giving Soph and Jess exaggerated reactions and making fun of the fact that they don't know what to do. The closest to an actual gag in this game is a bit of environmental storytelling. A baguette sits in a buggy, something that's only funny because it makes you think, baguette, baby, and that's a pleasing set of consonants to string together. Go on, say it out loud. You'll feel better. Youngblood stops at the jokes. It never looks beyond them, so it lacks sincerity, even when it tries to find it. The Nazis in this game aren't specified in their cruelty, they're just people shouting German as we shoot them. Its main villain, General Lothar Brand, is background noise until the end of the game, so we don't get a chance to care about him or the ideology that he represents. When the trio reach Paris, they meet with the French resistance, but the cast is so muted and uninvolved that you're not given a reason to care. Their headquarters are in the Paris catacombs. They've tried to make it cozy, the same way the Kreisau Circle tried to transform their U-boat in the new Colossus. Blankets and fairy lights typically line the walls. What does it say that the resistance is surrounded by corpses, even when they're resting? They literally sleep with the dead. None of them ever go out on missions, so the implication is they haven't seen the sun in months. What does that do to a person? Good question, me, but none of it is ever answered in the text or the subtext. The resistance wants to kill Nazis and, kill Nazis. That's the extent of their characterization, fluffed up with passing rambles about how badly they want to kill Nazis, so the edge is always there. We get two main members, Juju, the leader, and Jacques, a mute, scarred man who floats around in the background until his big reveal later.
Have you ever killed Nazis before?
Listen, ma'am. We were born to kill Nazis.
The girls follow BJ's trail to Paris and rendezvous with the resistance. Juju runs the place and the closest thing this game has to a pulse. She's warm, she's funny, she calls the girls in like a favourite aunt. We were born to kill Nazis, the twins grin. It should land like a mission statement, but it feels like a catchphrase. Everyone here wants to kill Nazis and wants you to know they really want to kill Nazis, and that's the deepest the water gets. The new Colossus had a messy tone, but it gave its resistance depth, questions about what they're fighting for, flaws to hammer on. Youngblood has an absence. Before Juju helps the girls find their father, she wants something done. There's a general sitting in a Zeppelin over Paris. She would like him not to be. I don't like Wolfenstein Youngblood, but I think its first mission is half decent. It gives us a unique setting for the series, a Zeppelin populated by guards and robot bartenders. It lets us push through casinos and cinemas and Nazi grandeur. It moves. There's a flashlight fight through pitch black tunnels that adds texture and variety before the game settles. It even ends with an adequate boss fight because enemy health isn't engineered to facilitate grinding yet. General Winkler, wearing Datyshid power armor because I guess it's just mass produced now, syndromes straight off the side of the Zeppelin and gets torn to shreds with pure pulpy spectacle. It's ridiculous, it's funny, a strutting Nazi supervillain reduced to a stain by two teenagers, and it's allowed to be ridiculous because none of it is real. Winkler is pixels in a video game, not a physical stand-in for political rivals you're encouraged to shoot in real life. If you've played other Wolfensteins, then you can enjoy the Splatterhouse opening because there's an assumption it will go somewhere and eventually say something. The problem with Youngblood is it never goes past the Splatterhouse, or the irony is a recruiting tool. You don't hand someone the ideology, you hand them the bit, the joke, the thing that goes down easy, and the belief rides in as part of it. The transgression is the fun part because it feels harmless, but it isn't harmless. Follow it out to fiction, past the edgy comment, past the ironic meme, and you arrive somewhere like the Bowl Patrol. In 2015, Dylan Roof walked into a church in Charleston, sat through an hour of Bible study, and murdered the 9 people who had welcomed him. The Bowl Patrol was an online network, a podcast, that turned Roof into a mascot. The name is a joke about his haircut, an act of terrorism filed under memes about bowl cuts. The punchline is that someone with a haircut so stupid would do something so, in their words, based. Dylan Roof looks like a loser, so it's ironic that he's a white supremacist hero. You're not endorsing a massacre, you're just laughing at how edgy it all is. We're having a laugh. Can't you take a joke? Why aren't you laughing? It's funny. Dylan Roof killed 9 people. Don't you get the joke? Irony is what lets a person approach something they would otherwise recoil from. You laugh with the group. You leave coded little messages in the corner of the internet in the hope one of your fellow freaks will see it and think that you're a big man. You turn murderers into heroes so you don't have to think about the fact that he believed the same thing as you. Edge is deniable because it's cheap. You can mass produce it and fire it into 1,000 comment sections a day, and every single one of them detonates about 10 times its own weight in somebody else's time and patience and goodwill. Attention spans have made this worse. It's hard to think critically about something if you're not forced to sit with it, to read about it, to do the work to challenge your own preconceptions. Most online participants in white supremacy let pundits do the thinking for them because they are so confused about who they hate that they cling to memes and jokes rather than take the time to examine the world around them. Everyone thinks they're the one doing the reading. That's the bit that gets me. The guy who spent 6 months in the archives and the guy who spent 6 months on a forum will both tell you the same thing about themselves. That they asked the questions nobody else was brave enough to ask, that they followed it wherever it went, that they did their own research, and they will use the exact same words to describe 2 completely different activities. A questioning spirit isn't a questioning spirit if it switches off the second it gets an answer it likes. What grifters call a pursuit of knowledge is really a pursuit of comfort, and its answers are delivered by edge, irony, and a desperate desire to waste your time.
A treat for you. Oh my god.
Youngblood's biggest crime is it made shooting Nazis boring. The elevator pitch was Wolfenstein satisfying combat plus a friend equals a good time. But the changes it made to combat means the first half of that equation gets ruptured.
What is your view of Israel?
Fine. Israel is currently committing a genocide. On October 7th, 2023, following years of conflict, the terrorist group Hamas launched rockets into Israel, killed 1,200 people, and took 251 hostages back to Gaza. Only 168 came back alive. Israel then began a military campaign that has since killed over 73,000 Palestinians, including at least 20,000 children. Israel said it would continue to do this until all hostages, dead and alive, were returned. On the 26th of January 2026, that's exactly what happened. As of this video, a ceasefire is apparently in place. The Israeli government has not honored that ceasefire. Israel's ambassador, DaniHaDani, summed up his country's position when he said, Israel has always been committed to the terms of the ceasefire agreement and has been equally ready to enforce the ceasefire when Hamas repeatedly violates those terms. Under that framing, every strike is a response. Israel claims that the ceasefire hasn't been broken because Hamas keeps breaking it first. The most common way that it's been broken is by crossing a temporary demarcation line, called the Yellow Line, drawn through the Gaza Strip. If a Palestinian crosses the border, the IDF attack. However, two things on this. The first is that the UN documents a pattern of behavior that shows Israeli soldiers are basically just looking for excuses to kill Palestinians. For example, 2 boys were killed in Bani Suela after collecting firewood for their wheelchair-bound father. An independent international commission by the UN found that A, the boys were more than 300 meters from any Israeli soldiers, so could not pose any threat, and B, it was unequivocal through the drone footage that the children were simply collecting firewood. James Elder, a spokesperson for UNICEF who are currently able to provide aid to Palestine, said, "During a period supposedly defined by restraint and protection, a child has been killed on average every single day for more than 8 months. You sneeze near the line and you may well get shot." The second thing to note is that Israel's territorial expansion is actively moving that line. When it was drawn up as part of the ceasefire, it gave 53% of Gaza to Israel, with plans to reduce that percentage over time. In 2026, IDF maps issued to aid organizations showed 64% of control. It hasn't reduced, it's grown. Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, has said he wants to achieve 70%. He and his government should be tried in The Hague. The ICC has a warrant out for his arrest, and every day that he doesn't answer it, the longer his list of crimes become. Israel are killing children en masse during a ceasefire, and while I obviously condemn the terrorism of Hamas, any argument or debate about nations or land is useless until that stops. Do you see how I was able to explain all of that without being anti-Semitic, or drawing on wild conspiracy theories, or turning Palestinians or Israelis into an abstract idea, or denying the fucking Holocaust? Across both the New Order and the New Colossus videos, I had a chunk of comments talking about Israel, or asking why I didn't mention Israel, or even implications that Israel's current crimes somehow justify the Holocaust. My New Order video was explicitly about weird things the Nazis believed or did in the 20th century. Why didn't I talk about Israel? Because Israel doesn't have anything to do with Wolfenstein. It didn't have anything to do with that focus, the same way the Soviet Union didn't have anything to do with that focus, or Japan didn't have anything to do with that focus. My New Colossus video was explicitly about America as a source of inspiration for Nazi ideology and how white supremacist thought carried into and out of the United States during World War II. Israel wasn't part of that focus either. At the risk of being glib, it's like watching Star Wars with someone and complaining that nobody's talking about fucking Gandalf. Whether on purpose or by accident, those comments fall under the second tactic that extremists deploy. If the first is edgy irony to sucker you into hate, the second is deploying whataboutisms to turn a group into an abstraction. The only reason you would mention Israel's crimes in a video about the Nazis is to imply that Jewish people got what was coming to them during the Holocaust. Newsflash, Israel's government doesn't represent all Jews, the same way Nazi Germany doesn't represent all Germans, or Hamas doesn't represent all Palestinians, or the KKK doesn't represent all white people. A whataboutism squashes a large group into an abstraction. It asks you to look away from a topic and focus instead on another one. As a reply to a 2-hour video on Nazi occultism, "What about Israel?" is gibberish. It's a non sequitur that only feels like a gotcha to the person typing it because somewhere in the back of their skull, 2 words have quietly been welded into one. Israel, Jews. Not a country and a people, just one lump, one thing, interchangeable. Swap them in and out as needed. It files them under a heading, and once they're a heading, you can do things to them you'd never do to a person because you're not doing it to a person anymore. You're doing it to a category. And explaining all of this makes me want to put my head through a wall. For years, a government has been carrying out an atrocity while claiming to act in the name of Jewish people everywhere. And that is a gift. Not to Palestinians, who are dying, but to the freaks, extremists who were already here, waiting the entire time for a respectable enough excuse to rant about the Jews. Now, they've got one. Now, somebody arrives at this, genuinely, decently furious about children being shot, and there's a bloke waiting at the entrance going, yeah mate, exactly, and you know what else? If the Jew did not exist, the anti-Semite would invent him, wrote Jean-Paul Sartre in 1946. Don't like something? It's the Jews' fault. Are you appalled that nothing's been done about Jeffrey Epstein's pedophile network? That's because Epstein was a Jew and his Jew mates are trying to cover it up, even though mounting evidence points to the fact the US president, a non-Jew, has plenty of reasons to sweep it under the rug. The reason is that he's a fucking nonce. Do gay people make you uncomfortable? Well, that's because they're part of the Jewish plan to stop us from breeding so they can take over the world. Are you noticing more brown people in your area? Well, the secret Jew government is sending them over to dilute the blood of whites. Gasp! That government has a name. The Zionist Occupation Government. ZOG, another term that appeared in my comments. It's more degrees of separation. Secret Jew government, anti-Semitic. Zionist occupation government, abstract. ZOG sounds like something from a sci-fi novel that implies a secret you're not in on. The abstraction doesn't ask legitimate questions, it only fearmongers. If ZOG controls everything from migration to war to food filled with soy, where is it? Clearly, it hasn't infiltrated the United Nations or the ICC, so how the hell is it organizing global migration movements? What about Jewish people who formerly called themselves Zionists that have openly called out Israel's genocide? Did Gabor Mate, Avi Shlaim, or Ilana Hammerman not get the memo? It's not just Jews that are made abstract through these techniques. Israel has done it to Palestinians too, but it is foundational to what white supremacists believe. Neo-Nazi John Eugene Inadeo II streams daily under the handle Handsome Truth. In front of a massive audience of, hundreds, he trolls actual children on the video chat site monkey.app, a site that's explicitly tailored to a young audience. That's already a weird thing for a 43-year-old man to do, but he also uses filters to slap an ape over his greasy face and puts on an exaggerated accent while tossing around the M-word. By doing so, he turns his fans against an abstraction because repeated reinforcement makes them think this is what black people are really like. As he throws up sea Kyles and spits on himself, he begs his audience to fund this bullshit so he can keep, defending the white race. Abstraction is historic and not specific to internet culture, it's just gotten worse. But in 1973, French author Jean Raspiel wrote The Camp of the Saints. It's a fictional novel that's increasingly championed by neo-Nazis, white supremacists, and those on the alternative right. It tells a story where a fleet of ships carrying 1 million immigrants arrives on the French Riviera and triggers a total breakdown of social order. It doesn't characterize these immigrants as people. All we know is that they come from India. Their leader goes by the name Turd Eater, and we never learn what the socio-political reason is for them migrating. Fill in the gaps yourself. Let your prejudice do the thinking. Anyway, Wolfenstein Youngblood's biggest crime is it made shooting Nazis boring. The elevator pitch with satisfying combat plus a friend equals a good time, but the changes it made to combat means the first half of that equation gets ruptured. You're still encouraged to start stealthy, kill commanders in an arena, and then go all guns blazing, but because of one key change, these arenas now feel confusing, unfair, and tedious. There's no commander radar now. You need to find them through the inevitable chaos that comes with being spotted while floods of enemies ambush you. The longer it takes for you to find that commander, the more difficult his reinforcements get, so you get stuck in an infinite loop of robots and cyborgs while he hides in a corner somewhere. It turns fights into a slog. Dual wielding is gone. No longer can you push into a room alternating shotguns. That was something that differentiated BJ Blazkowicz from a Call of Duty hero. It enhanced his pulp. His daughters lose that feeling. At the end of the game, you unlock the God Key, something that lets you absorb bullets with your left hand ready for a kinetic blast. But you can only wield your pistol when doing this, not a shotgun, because the game hates fun and the game hates me. Despite jumping ahead 20 years, weaponry is almost identical to what BJ had in 1960. An assault rifle, an SMG, a single shotgun. Wonder weapons are unlocked methodically. The Laser Kraftwerk and Diesel Kraftwerk both make a return, though the Diesel Kraftwerk's mines fire in an awkward arc so you can't be nearly as precise with your shots. The Electro Kraftwerk is our one new weapon. It pays homage to the Tesla gun from Return to Castle Wolfenstein, sparking electricity that chains between bad guys. Because Youngblood has a more open approach to its level design, it's crying out for a sniper rifle, but no dice. Verticality is more of a focus in combat arenas. One of Youngblood's greatest strengths is how it lays out its map, but you're not given any tools to make the most of that level design. Balconies scream sniper nest. The approach to co-op waves absently at tactics where one player covers the other. Youngblood gestures at these ideas and doesn't follow through on them, so you end up feeling like BJ, but neutered. The twins both get a Datishud suit, designed by Abby using Setroth's blueprints, but aside from a very welcome double jump, they don't feel like they're wearing it. They might as well be covered in tinfoil.
Break into the towers, kill the Uber commandant, steal their keys, open the main computers, and Bob's your uncle.
My uncle's name was Hubert, and he was killed by the Nazis.
The girls return to the Paris catacombs, ready to celebrate with Juju for killing their first Nazi commander. Juju grooms the girls with French wine, chocolate, and cigarettes, something that's first played off as a bit of fun, but really foreshadows her true intentions. Abby tells us that she's been decrypting some Nazi intel and learned that BJ was in Paris looking for something called Lab X. Years ago, a Nazi general called Lothar Brand built 3 facilities called the Brothers to control and subdue Paris. To find Lab X, we need to find the Uber commander at each brother, kill him, and steal his passkey. Abby will then use those keys to find out where Lab X is. The Uber commanders are never given names, personalities, or motivations. They're the same as every other commander that can call in backup in a combat arena. Most of them wear masks, so you can't even see their face. They are an abstraction. As I gunned them down, I was reminded of the Enigma machine in the new Colossus, side missions that sent BJ off on assassination missions. The Enigma machine was thin, but we at least got dossiers explaining who our targets were and what they did to deserve a bullet. Youngblood isn't interested in any of that. It would distract from the grind. For the first time in almost 40 years, Wolfenstein introduces level gating. And it destroys combat. I just shot you in the head 3 times. You should be dead, you prick. Bite my banger. At no point in my Nazi killing game should I empty a whole assault rifle into a Nazi and he's still alive. Levels and health bars actually go against that all-important idea that Nazis were just people. A level 27 commandant that takes 10 shotgun rounds to the face means he's more physically able than a regular person. They are mechanically a master race in this game. Most enemies have barriers. You have to destroy a barrier before you can hurt them. There are 2 types, soft and hard. Readability is the first issue because both types of barrier are communicated by 2 different sizes of grey rectangle. During the chaos, you're not going to be able to tell the difference. 5 weapons are good at taking out soft barriers, and only 3 weapons are good against hard. One of those hard weapons is a bloody pistol, so you might as well not count that one. The balancing is all over the place here. The majority of difficult or elite enemies have hard barriers, so God help you if you don't have ammo for the laser Kraftwerk, because then you're just unloading on them with an assault rifle. On normal difficulty, that might as well be a BB gun for the damage it does to the barrier. That will happen because enemies are generally incredibly spongy, even if you're both the same level, and even after years of patches, Nazis don't drop enough ammo to keep you topped up. The ammunition economy is especially egregious when you turn to supply crates. There are 3 types, and each one needs a different Kraftwerk weapon to blow open. Here I am, using a very precious diesel Kraftwerk mine to blow open the corresponding crate. I am rewarded with 1 Electro Kraftwerk round. 1. I'm just wasting time here sacrificing one type of ammo for another. What's the point? That stinginess slows down Wolfenstein's famously raucous combat. Hip firing is how you lose bullets, so you need to jump into iron sights to make sure you don't waste shots. That means you're over-relying on cover or tanking bullets while aiming. It is the opposite of what makes the Wolfenstein experience. The grind even takes away from one of the things that Youngblood does right. Explosions are big and booming in this game. Some of them are absolutely glorious, the best id Tech 6's engine has ever looked. But that means the blast radius is incredibly wide, and if it catches you, it knocks you on your ass. This slows you down and is always annoying. Now that's fine by itself, it's solid tension that sets up a risk and reward strategy, but the spongy enemies make it all risk and no reward. You blow up a barrel and it doesn't kill a Nazi, it just puts a little dent in their massive health bar and knocks you down. You are punished more than they are. Jess and Soph can't rip miniguns off turrets like their dad could, another unnecessary limitation. But if you grind and grind and grind, you can eventually unlock the ability to pick up heavy guns dropped by elite enemies. Do not do this. Heavy guns only ever have 3 or 4 rounds, not full magazines like in BJ's day, and it takes more than that to kill your average Nazi in this game, so fuck me, I guess. Level gating is the central fusion of game design that we now associate with the live service Grift. I talked about it with Suicide Squad, I talked about it with Marvel's Avengers, I talked about it with Gotham Knights, and we've seen it again and again and again. It's not always destructive, but it is always uninspired. Level gating means the game is designed explicitly to keep you playing for longer. The next story mission is to go and take on one of the 3 brother facilities. I want to play the main story, so off I go. A Zerstorer, a giant robot that guards the gate, just decked me in 2 hits. That meant I was forced to either swap to easy mode, something I didn't want to do because easy mode makes the game an even duller cakewalk, or go and grind out some levels, vacuously extending my playtime. Mathematically, every system is designed to rip minutes out of you. Even if you get to the appropriate level, it takes longer for you to kill an enemy than it should because of the spongy health bars and barrier systems. And that philosophy carries into how you get stronger too. What makes Youngblood better than those other examples that I've cited is that its upgrade system isn't bogged down by a dozen multicolored resources. There's no garbage loot goot system here. Instead, you find silver coins to upgrade your weapons and buy new perks by earning XP. Everything returns to these 2 rewards. Killing Nazis drop coins and lets you earn XP. Crates are full of them waiting to be found. Side missions and main missions fill up your pockets. Abby gives us weekly and daily quests to grind out while you're off to the next important thing. Dailies. In a Wolfenstein game. Examples include find a certain amount of armor, or kill a certain amount of Nazis. Glup, glup, glup. Earning this stuff isn't really where my problems lie though. It's how you spend it. Wolfenstein's perk system connected the series through line of nurture over nature. Your playstyle unlocked certain perks for BJ. By doing, you became better at the thing you're doing. Harness enough stealth kills and they start healing you. Youngblood does away with that. Now, it's all about abilities. Earn XP to earn levels that reward ability points. Then hope that you can spend those ability points on what you want because the really useful stuff is more expensive than a subscription to Nick Fuentes. More on that later. Take Kraftwerk Charge. It auto-charges your wonder weapons, something that would be a major boon in a game with a broken ammo economy. It costs 5 ability points, something that realistically means you need to grind for 5 levels. Crazy, and also wrong, because you don't have to grind for 5 levels to earn Kraftwerk Charge. You have to grind for a minimum 45 levels, because Kraftwerk Charge, just like all of the other abilities, is level gated and sits at the end of a series of other abilities that you have to buy first. By the time I rolled credits on Youngblood, I'd done about 80% of the side missions and I hadn't hit the parameters to unlock Kraftwerk Charge. Instead, I had to make do with the rest of the abilities that focus on percentage increases. Take Far Grabber, something that costs 2 ability points and increases loot range by 50%. Boy, that's exciting! Weapon upgrades come in 3 categories: Nadel, accuracy, tempo, speed, and steer, damage. For regular weapons, those upgrades are just stat boosts. They're not as creative as what we saw in the new Colossus, where you could turn a grenade into a weapon of mass destruction that boomed with electricity, shrapnel, and napalm all at once. Now it all boils down to fire rates and damage outputs. The exception to that is Kraftwerk weaponry. Our 3 special guns can be tweaked to fit a playstyle. Exhibit A is the Diesel Kraftwerk. You can make it fire multiple mines at once. Back at Resistance HQ, one of the members, Odette Lemieux, pulls us to the side. "I'm here to kill Nazis," she says. "That is what I live for. That is all I have left now. But am I here to kill Nazis? Or am I here to collect silver coins?" With a Z. Odette's entire reason for living is a daily quest. There is a number attached to every single thing in this game, and once you pass the tutorial, you stop seeing Nazis and just start seeing numbers. We might be in the Nazi killing business, but business is bad. General Lothar Brand, creator of the Brothers, is the game's villain. We won't meet him for hours yet, plenty of grinding ahead, baby, but as we explore the world, we pick up a bit about him. He was in charge of Nazi-occupied Paris, but after Hitler was killed, he decided he wanted to be the new boss. He calls his fellow Nazis stale, citing their defeat in the US, and thinks the Third Reich died with Hitler. It's time for the Fourth Reich. That name has tendrils in the real world. The neo-Nazi group, the Atomwaffen Division, wants to build it. If you wander Paris with your ears open, you quickly get the feeling that nobody is in charge. This is partly because of how the game's structured. After meeting the Resistance, it's all side missions all the time if you're playing as intended. Those missions vary from the pointless, find Hitler statues and shoot them, to the tedious, wander aimlessly around a stash of interrogation tapes, opening every drawer labeled Beta Gamma until you find some intel. There are 8 drawers that say Beta Gamma and no way to know which one has what you need. Location-wise, many of these side quests overlap. Gestapo HQ, for example, has those interrogation tapes and information on a missing resistance fighter, but the parameters of each side quest spawns separately. You'll go to get the interrogation tape, but you won't learn about the resistance fighter while there. It makes the game unnecessarily repetitive, while also stretching out playtime. Hitler's gone and the Reich just kept going, out of habit. Broadcasts still sign off with Heil Hitler, a salute to a man who isn't there to receive it. Whoever the new Führer is must be pissed.
This game series is propaganda to enforce the lies of World War II. The Germans were the good guys. If they had won, then the West wouldn't be ruled over by Epstein's employers right now.
Today's neo-Nazis are split over how to handle Hitler. The United Church of Yahweh abandoned swastikas and armbands, but still literally preached Nazi ideology. Jonathan Williams, the leading pastor of the group, told NBC, "We don't like swastikas. We don't like the negativity. The majority of people see all that as pure evil." "Oh gee, John, you think?" But on the other side, he's deified. Some groups criticize those who try to hide from Hitler, claiming that they are slave to optics and that they should throw their weight behind the one true Aryan savior. For example, Christopher Pohlhaus, the founder of Blood Tribe, believes that Adolf Hitler was a reincarnation of Odin. The British movement gathered in a pub on the 20th of April to celebrate Uncle A's 136th birthday. They ate cake with a swastika on it. Lothar Brand subscribes to the same belief as James Mason, a 20th century neo-Nazi best known for his book Siege, something that's become required reading in white supremacist circles. Just like many of the Nazi writing I had to read for this video, it is a tedious manuscript. Mason thought that the only way the Nazis can reign supreme again is by politically evolving. The mass party, rallies, and bid for popular support simply doesn't work anymore. A new face is needed. Brand thinks that face is him. James Mason thought that face was Charles Manson. Quote, "The feelings that I went through after making the acquaintance of Charles Manson and members of his family can only be compared to those I went through after first becoming a National Socialist. It was, and remains, a special kind of feeling. To sum it up, I quote from one family member who commented after I'd introduced her to the books of George Lincoln Rockwell, for she was already familiar with Mein Kampf, where Rockwell stops, Manson begins." That's a lot of words to say you want to shag him, pal. Youngblood's bad guy is a neo-Nazi that is fighting other Nazis. That is an awesome thread for this series to pull, but it never goes beyond a couple of memos and shallow boss dialogue at the end of the game.
It's literally anti-white racism.
When it comes to extremists, there are 2 types of infighting: self-interest and sincerity. And the self-interest comes in 2 currencies: money and ego. You'll find self-interest with influencers like Tommy Robinson or Nick Fuentes. You'll find sincerity with doctrinaire groups like the KKK. In Everything You Love Will Burn, Vegas Tenno spent some time with the Klan and saw how they bristled when other white supremacist groups, like the white power skinheads, were nearby. Quote, "Our relationship with the skins is not the best," Christian Petrie, a scrawny Klansman in his 20s, said to me. I guess you could argue that we share the same goal, but we do things differently. In his own euphemistical way, Christian was telling me that the Klan regarded skinheads as mindless thugs whose only redeeming quality was that they were pro-white. The skinheads mostly regarded the Klan as hopelessly outdated sticks in the mud who dressed up in silly costumes and didn't drink. Left-wing groups get hammered for infighting all the time. Marxists versus Maoists, communists versus socialists. But watch neo-Nazis, Aryan armies, the KKK, and all of the other white supremacist sects that sit under that banner for long enough, and you start to see that they yell at each other almost as much as they yell at the world. No true Scotsman style. They are determined to draw attention to the thin, barely imperceptible lines that separate them. Neo-Nazis embrace white supremacy through Hitler's National Socialism, including anti-Semitism, authoritarianism, racial hierarchy, and admiration for the Third Reich. Aryanists believe in white supremacy, but think Hitler went about it all wrong. The KKK centers on white American supremacy with a specific focus on blacks, Jews, and Catholics. Christian identity believes white Europeans are God's chosen people, supreme to all other races for religious reasons. Racial Odinists are white supremacists who believe they're the Norse god Odin's chosen people. Skinheads get lumped together, but their belief system actually does split off. When it arose in the UK, it didn't start as a racist movement, it started as a class one. It was made up of all creeds and skin colours. But then, over time, it got co-opted by a white supremacist sect, and the rest is history. Oh, and fun fact, OG skinheads now dub Nazi skinheads boneheads. For the sake of accuracy and fun, we'll do the same for the rest of the video. Most normal people would argue that it does not matter if you're wearing a white hood or throwing a Sieg Heil. These ideologies all come back to white supremacy. Chuck them into a Venn diagram and it might as well be a circle titled the Ball-Bag Brigade. Open it up to other races and that circle expands beyond white supremacy and into the big bubble of racial supremacy. The Ball-Bag Brigade becomes the Dickhead Division. The Nation of Yahweh claims that African Americans are God's chosen, arguing that Jews and whites are literally devils. The Jewish Defense League think Arab and black people are scum. All supremacists are assholes. Ethno-states by design are antithetical to human progress because it kills collaboration based on pigmentation. But we're focusing on white supremacists because I'm not Jewish and I'm not black, so I don't get secondhand embarrassment when they speak, and none of these people are getting invited on the news. White nationalists are a growing movement who argue that they don't believe in white supremacy, but they do believe that white people are one tribe who should have their own nation. Richard Spencer, seen here once again getting decked, is a good example. Another is Matthew Heimbach. The Little Fuhrer labels himself this way and justifies his idea of an ethno-state by saying, "Whites will be the minority in 25 years, and the people are beginning to see it now. Nobody wants to be a minority. Being a minority fucking sucks. Look at how we've treated black people. Don't for a second think that they'll treat us any better." As preparation for a whites-only country, he tried to bring all of these groups under one banner. It was to be the grand unveiling of Matthew and self-described neo-Nazi Jeff Shope's big collaboration, Vegas 10 Old writes. A new coalition of American white nationalists called the Aryan Nationalist Alliance. "We're still working on the name," Matthew added, almost apologetically. Jeff had to throw some meat to his guys, so I'll let him keep the Aryan part for now. We have to be patient with these people. They've been about the swastika for decades, and I know it fucking sucks to stand next to them. It's a setback, sure, but it's not the end of the world. They were going to call us Nazis anyway, so in a way, nothing has changed. They were going to call us Nazis anyway. You know what I would do if someone called me a Nazi? Stop hanging out with fucking Nazis! In all of my research, I found two things that united the Ball-Bag Brigade. A shared hatred of Antifa, a common enemy does a lot to bring people together, and white supremacy. White nationalists, like Matthew Heimbach, might claim that they're different because they don't think white people are supreme, but just like the ironic jokes, that typically becomes a smokescreen. Heimbach later went on to hold a rally that ended with Nazi salutes and people shouting, "Hail Heimbach," but it totally sucks that he has to share the stage with Nazis, right? The question we should ask people who hide behind semantics like white nationalism is a constant, clear, repeated why. If you're not a white supremacist, if you don't think the white race is superior, why do you think we need a white ethno-state? Ask that question and the answers will be predictably vague and confused. Because other races don't integrate into our culture. Subjective. White culture doesn't exist because culture comes from groups, mainly countries. Just compare the UK, France, and Russia. There's plenty of overlap and plenty of deep historic differences. To think culture is subject to race is literally a Nazi belief. Alfred Rosenberg wrote about it at length, to the point that he argued culture is related spiritually to a magical race soul. Well, we're going to be a minority soon, and look what we did to other minorities. That's an answer that's paranoid and assumes that the majority of human beings think of race in terms of the other. Most of us just think in terms of people. You know, nations where people aren't judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. It's a healthy way to live. These movements suffer from values-based infighting consistently, meaning they splinter off. Just take Nick Griffin. Here in the UK, he was a member of the neo-Nazi group National Front, but then he and some of his rusty pals split off to join and lead the British National Party. Then, after the BNP got embarrassed at the polls, infighting began and it splintered again into the patriotic alternative, led by Mark Collett, a man that looks like he drinks aftershave. Sikh Isles turned into euphemism. Collett claimed it was just an innocent little group fighting for white civil rights. Nazis rebranded. Like BJ Blazkowicz said, the monster changes shape. Matthew Heimbach's group changed shape a lot during his rise in the 2010s. His latest plan was the Traditionalist Workers' Party, and the infighting there became more personal than political. The TWP self-destructed in 2018 after he had an affair with the party spokesman's wife, who was also his stepmother-in-law, and beat his wife. The party that existed to protect white families was finished within a week. Back to the UK, Britain First, neo-fascist hate group, told the same story in miniature. Paul Golding and Jada Franzen, best known for filming themselves screaming at brown people through takeaway windows. In 2019, it was revealed that Golding had been abusing Franzen for years. She left the party. Britain First runs on a pledge to protect women and girls. Flashback to the past and you'll see violent infighting isn't anything new. You might remember this guy from my New Colossus video, George Lincoln Rockwell, founder of the American Nazi Party. In 1967, he was shot and killed by John Patler. Immediately, everyone assumed it was an anti-fascist taking their shot at a fascist, but we later learned that Patler was a disgruntled Nazi who was angry because Rockwell kicked him out of the party for infighting. Patler was sowing division between blonde-haired members and dark-haired members. It is wild that this ideology has endured. Even now, in the year 2026, we have Nick Fuentes in open warfare with other members of the alt-right and with manosphere grifter and anti-Semite Sneeko. On his streams, Fuentes cackled as fans fantasized about detailed plans to kill him. Clearly, in a crowded field where everyone is selling the same product, race-based grievance, you can't differentiate on quality, so you've got to differentiate on extremity. Don't listen to him, influencers say. Don't give him your money, he's a sellout. Focus on me, I'm your one true political savior. You win an audience by saying the thing the last guy wouldn't. Soon, your audience isn't an audience anymore, they're an army marching for a cause. Or mumbling into a microphone for a cause.
Charlie, I speak for a not insignificant coalition of students in your organization that believes that your movement is utterly toothless. There was a young man, I think a week or two ago, that slapped you around pretty good on immigration.
In 2019, Charlie Kirk's right-wing organization, Turning Point USA, got into a slapfest with Nick Fuentes' Groyper group, America First. Kirk toured universities to give talks on his personal brand of conservatism, and young men would heckle or interrogate him during the Q&A section. This wasn't classic debate in the marketplace of ideas. It was concentrated, organized trolling by Nick Fuentes. On his Telegram channel, he wrote, "We need Charlie Kirk to get hammered with multiple questions like this every time he does a public Q&A. We need to make it so that he never does an open floor ever again because a Groyper will be there waiting to drop red pills on the audience. If Charlie Kirk comes to your school, it is your duty to ask a based question." Kirk was already pretty extreme in his views. He peddled the Great Replacement theory. He called the 1964 Civil Rights Act a mistake. But Nick Fuentes took umbrage with him because he wasn't extreme enough on immigration and, most importantly, supported Israel.
I've seen 3 specific threats to what we're trying to do, which again is to destroy Conservative Inc. This week we've all come together because we acknowledge that Charlie Kirk is not conservative, he's destroying the country, and we can all agree that we have to put a stop to that, right?
It wasn't enough to rail against boomers and legacy media. That's an age-old grift. We need new targets. Now, Nick Fuentes wanted to take down alt-right organizations that were too moderate. Look at Charlie Kirk up on stage with his moderate views that brown people are trying to replace the superior white man. The reality is that Nick Fuentes smelled an opportunity. He was too extreme to join Turning Point USA. He hates Jewish people, so Ben Shapiro would never let him join the Daily Wire. But his demographic, angry boys shouting at the wrong things, overlapped with both organizations. His fanbase had started to attack other influencers, and he saw an opportunity to fan the flames. The Groyper War came to a decisive end when a couple dozen Groypers surrounded Kirk at the University of Houston, booing him and chanting America first, forcing him to retreat. 6 years later, Charlie Kirk would be assassinated, not by a Groyper, but by this guy, Tyler Robinson, and various right-wing clans exploded with even more grifter infighting. Pundit Candace Owens said Israel had something to do with Charlie Kirk's death to the point she had a public falling out with other influencers over it. Nick Fuentes jumped on the circuit to curtail any conspiracy theories for two obvious reasons. He didn't want anyone pointing fingers at his army of fans, and conspiracy theories weren't a good way to suck up Kirk's audience. Kirk wasn't cold in the ground, and the movement was already fighting over who inherits his followers. It looks like a war over ideas, but it's a war over who owns the audience. They will tell you that they're fighting about purity. Who's the real freak? Who's gone soft? Who's a fed and who's a sellout? But strip the costume off, and it's the oldest fight there is. Too many people selling the same product to the same room. Lothar Brand looks at a Reich still saluting a corpse and he thinks, I'm the one who can save it. I am the true heir. He spends the game fighting his fellow Nazis as much as he's fighting the resistance, but that never becomes part of the gameplay or world design. We don't see Third Reichers fight Fourth Reichers. They're not even designed to look different. Brand's Reich are weird Nazis because Nazis are weird. I do wonder if they'd agree with Nicholas8814, who jumped into my comments to say,
Uncle H was right about everything.
If you spend any time in New Paris, and you will because the game marches you back through the same districts over and over, you'll walk past a pair of Nazis standing on Victory Boulevard. One of them will ask the other how the place got its name. The other will tell him. You'll leave, do a mission, come back, and they'll be standing in the exact same spot having the exact same conversation like the first one never happened. How did Victory Boulevard get its name? Every time, word for word, forever. Here's what Victory Boulevard is. Years ago, it's where General Brand crushed a resistance uprising. It's a massacre site that's been sanded down into small talk. I would call that a stroke of genius that comments on how extremist ideology is normalized and legitimized if it was purposeful, or if these two Nazis talked about anything else. Youngblood takes an idea from Wolfenstein 2009. It's set in an overworld city hub separated into districts. Those districts are separated by titanic gates that you need to open, or a metro system you need to unlock. One of those districts, Little Berlin, is ironically the nicest looking spot in the game. Banners, balloons, confetti and flags are draped over a shopping district. Just like Roswell and the New Colossus, it's pleasant despite the swastikas. A glossy aesthetic that covers up the dreary, demolished hellscape that is the rest of Paris. The rot's there if you look. The rest of the city is trash-strewn alleyways and boarded-up shop fronts. The detention center district is, suitably, all tanks and tents and guard posts, but Riverside is meant to be the commercial district and it's a dump. The Reich has decided which streets get the balloons and which get the barbed wire, and has told everyone that the balloons are the truth and the barbed wire is just administration. Little Berlin is a postcard covering up the truth. That feels purposeful to show the banality of Nazi destruction, but because the game never leaves here, and because it makes you revisit these locations ad nauseum for grinding, it all just starts to feel boring. Well, that's not strictly true. You do leave Parisian streets in a couple of ways. The underground, a set of boring tunnels beneath the city, are pitch black so you fight through with your torch. It's an interesting gimmick the first time that adds a bit of variety, less so the 10th. There are a labyrinth of tunnels made up of Nazis, and because the game refuses to give you an actual world map to check, you're stuck trying to find your way with the minimap. It's an easy way to get lost. I'm pissed off. Another time that we leave is when we finally take on the Brothers.
You are entering Brothers 3, the research and development center of the Nazis in Paris.
They're raid dungeons that have thankfully been patched because at launch, dying during a Brother mission would send you right back to the beginning, and because bad guys are so spongy, there is a good chance that would happen. We get 3 in total. Brother 1 is Gestapo headquarters. Brother 2 is a transportation hub that helped brands subjugate Paris. Brother 3 is a research center. They all feel fundamentally identical, and none of them come with interesting storytelling or world building. The adventures of Arthur and Kenneth get more plot than the story of this game. For the brothers, you can either blast through the gates or find secret alternative ways inside. You might be dreaming of Dishonored with that description, especially because Arcane helped with the level design, but Dishonored this ain't. Brother 1 and Brother 2 simply make you grind out a side quest to learn you can get in through the underground tunnels. And I don't know about you, but by the time I was strong enough to do a brother, I was pretty fucking sick of underground tunnels. Speaking to Eurogamer, senior game designer Andreas Ogefor explained how the studio approached world design that gives you choice. Quote, "We want to provide you with the tools to play the game the way you want to, and that's something we kind of tried to do with New Colossus. I don't think we did it nearly well enough. That's something I think this game does much better." Andreas should have said tool singular because there is just one. The double jump is how you'll find alternate routes around a zone. For example, I wanted to break into an apartment and, using the double jump, I hopped up on balconies and broke in through a second floor window. However, the mission design doesn't reward the level design. There were just 2 guards in this apartment and I had to kill them no matter what. Not much was really gained from balcony hopping rather than going up the stairs. Holistically, navigation is messy and clunky. The metro maps act as a fast travel system, but they're basically just interactive loading screens that pad out your time. Side quests will have you fast travel, go to a location, trek back to the metro, fast travel, go to another location, and trek back to the metro. On and on it goes until you go cross-eyed. You'd think that, as a peace offering, the game might let you teleport back to headquarters whenever you like, but you can only do that after completing a mission. In the background, the world is drowning. Flash floods are on the way. Bizarre storms threaten to tear Paris apart. We hear that Brazil is underwater, catastrophe on a global scale. The Nazis' official position is that it's just a little bit of bad weather, but when even the Reich's own scientists can't keep pretending, they rebrand it. They propose calling it a 5th season, Sturmzeit, storm time. Give the apocalypse a cozy name, slot it onto the calendar between autumn and winter, and it's not the end of the world anymore, it's just a thing that happens now. The new normal. This is some of Youngblood's sharpest writing, and it's in a collectible most players will never read. The world doesn't reinforce it. There are no day-night cycles or a spit of rain until the very end. That means the game doesn't respond to its own writing, but it also, save one exception, can't remember anything that you do. That exception comes from the radio. Eventually, you'll get a side mission to kill a Nazi operator. It lets the resistance take over broadcasts. That does change the world, but in a way that is less entertaining. Before, we got Nazi propaganda that told civilians to read a page of Mein Kampf a day to earn extra rations. Scripture from a dead prophet, ration like bread. Now, it's just the same couple of messages occasionally echoing up a street. We are not terrorists. We are a resistance. Elsewhere, you destroy a turret, it respawns. Kill some Nazis and they pop back in before you leave a street, so the fight never feels meaningful. In the detention district, I shut down the drone network. I found a code on a floppy disk, decoded it on a PC, fought through a small war to input it, and I genuinely cannot tell you if it made the slightest lasting difference the next time I loaded in. The world forgets. It resets around you. It drains every action of weight. But forgetting isn't always something that just happens to a place. Sometimes it's a job. Sometimes someone sits down and does it on purpose. Wolfenstein's Nazis have edited their history, something real-life Nazis know a bit about. George Lincoln Rockwell invented a fake GI called Lou Core. That's Rockwell backwards, what a kooky guy. Under that name, he sold grotesque, invented Holocaust eyewitness stories to a pulp magazine called Sir. He did this so that later he could jab a finger at one of those stories and say, oh, that one's a lie, I should know I wrote it, and let the doubt bleed onto every true account. Manufacture a fake to discredit the reals. Fake news for Nazis. Scattered through Paris are genuinely brilliant collectibles, in-world documents, little films, all produced by the Reich. Through finding them, you catch a regime trying to rewrite itself. The best one is a documentary. It's about a man called Wilhelm Strass, and it presents him as a gentle soul. An animal lover, a philanthropist, a patron of the arts maybe, a friend to the community. 20 years after his violent end, the Nazis are trying to normalize one of its weirdest members, dressing him up as a nice old gentleman. To pull from Nicholas 8814, he's Uncle Strass. It's not just Death's Head. The Reich is actively covering up what happened in the Old Blood expansion. It's burying its own history, sealing the record, making sure the ugly bits don't surface. The younger generation of Nazis are happy to oblige. Following her death, Caroline Becker had her defeat turned into an official anniversary. The Nazis wanted everyone to remember what a terrifying foe she was, and that they bested her. But in the 20 years since, some Nazis can't be bothered to observe it anymore. It's old news. Nobody cares. Youngblood's environmental storytelling, the propaganda, the brand new and very welcome audio logs, the little forged histories is sharper and more thoughtful than the actual plot that the game is buried in. Machine Games understood exactly how a regime launders its own past. They wrote it beautifully. They just wrote it into optional pickups that most players will walk straight past on their way to the next spongy Nazi. Ironic, really, the most incisive thing this game has to say about how extremism can be sanitized is something the game itself is half buried, ready to be forgotten.
Jewish propaganda goy slap game. Laughing face.
Nous sommes la génération de ceux qui meurent pour un regard de travers.
Oh, Generation Identity, I didn't see you there. In 2002, the neo-Nazi group Unite Radical spun off into the neo-fascist organization Bloc Identitaire. Bloc was trying to shrug off the anti-Semitism that had defined its predecessor for years, as well as unchain itself from the fact one of its members had tried to assassinate French President Jacques Chirac. To nobody's surprise, Bloc carried a lot of that poison into its shiny new name, so in 2012, the youth wing of the group decided another rebrand was in order. They announced themselves as Generation Identitaire, a more sanitized version that could break into the mainstream. Bloc argued about ethnic cleansing, Identitaire argued about remigration. They mean the same thing. They're both far-right conspiracy theories about poisoned blood and brown people trying to conquer the West. But Identitaire knew how to play the game and speak the language of the news cycle rather than goose-stepping down the street. Instead, they just chant-seek Heil in private. This strategy has a name. Marine Le Pen, head of the far-right National Front in France, called it de-diabolization, de-demonization. The idea is you sand a movement's edges off to make it electable. In her case, it meant distancing herself from her Nazi sympathizer and Holocaust denier father. The internet has a simpler word for it: sanewashing. You take something unhinged or repellent and launder it into something that sounds reasonable so it can walk into rooms it would otherwise be thrown out of. All around the world, the far right has turned it into a professional discipline. You saw the exact same instinct at home in Britain with Mark Collette, the neo-Nazi we met last chapter, the one who recommends his followers read Mein Kampf. When Collette fronts patriotic alternative in public, he doesn't lead with the Hitler stuff, he leads with the community litter picks and hiking trips and concern for white working class families. The genocidal core is still in there, but the shop window is all wholesome countryside and civic pride. My favourite example is so literal that it is almost a cartoon.
We're about the closest thing to Hitler's Nazi party as it could be.
The National Socialist Movement, for years one of the biggest neo-Nazi groups in America, looked at its own branding and decided the swastika was costing it customers. So, in 2016, it dropped the swastika and swapped it for the Othala rune, an old Norse symbol that the SS also used, so nothing about the meaning changed, but the general public doesn't clock it the same way they clock a swastika. The group's then leader, Jeff Schoep, remember him, said the change was, quote, an attempt to become more integrated and more mainstream. Hilariously, the headline of the New York Times describes the National Socialist movement as alt-right, not Nazi, even though it's talking about goddamn swastikas. And if you double that hilarity, the NSM went back to the swastika in 2019 after Matthew Heimbach, remember him too, buggered off. The NSM didn't feel like they had to hide anymore. For an example of when a rebrand actually works, you just have to look at Sweden. The Sweden Democrats were founded in 1988 out of a movement called Keep Sweden Swedish. Actual ex-Nazis, like Gustaf Ekstrom, were in the founding mix, uniforms and all. Patiently, across 3 decades, they ran the Le Pen playbook to the letter. New leader, new suits, bin the jackboots, keep the message. And it worked. In 2022, they became the second largest party in the country and the spine of the coalition that now governs it. Machine Games, the studio that made Wolfenstein Youngblood, is Swedish. The biggest anti-fascist trilogy of the last decade comes from the country where the sanewash has already reached the government benches. The call, as they say, is coming from inside the house. Sanewashing is not moderation. Nobody in these examples believes anything different than they did before. Take eugenics. Nowadays, the concept has been sanewashed into conversations about IQ, or crime rates, or incompatible cultures. Just take living cockroach Zach Hoyt, aka Asmongold. He loves to talk about this stuff, and he knows what he's doing when he does it. Here he is saying that he's a funnel for people to find out-and-out extremists like Nick Fuentes.
I view my role as being a more mainstream ally towards this stuff without necessarily spearheading any sort of like real controversial change, because I can't really do that. It would compromise my position. That's the reason I'm a funnel. Yeah, I kind of do that. Yeah, like a funnel in a way.
So let's break down just 3 examples of his sanewashing. First, crime rates. Asmongold has jumped on the Nick Fuentes bandwagon regarding black crime rates because he thinks it justifies his bias. The argument goes that black Americans are around 13% of the population and are arrested for a disproportionate share of certain violent crimes relative to that 13%. That is true. Grifters like Asmongold arch his eyebrow and say, well, I'm just asking questions and the answers are concerning, you know? It's the Elon Musk tactic, dressing up racial bias as innocent questions. He is asking the wrong questions and seeking out incomplete answers. There are myriad reasons why you can't take that statistic at face value and immediately assume a racial hierarchy. The first is that a statistic like that doesn't describe a race, it describes a place. If being black were the cause of the violence, then black people everywhere would show the same rate. They don't, not even close. The overall American homicide rate sits around 5.8 per 100,000. The British rate is around 1. Following Asmongold's logic, Americans are 5 to 6 times more violent than British people before you've said a single word about race. So the biggest predictor of whether someone dies by homicide in the West isn't their skin, it's whether they're standing in America. Same races, same mix of people, wildly different outcomes. And the variable that changed wasn't genetic, it was a whole country's worth of guns, history, and policy. And it gets worse for the race realist because the pattern holds inside races too. American homicide rates rose and fell by half within a couple of decades. The human genome did not rewrite itself in the 90s. Black homicide rates swing enormously between one American city and the next, between one generation and the next. A cause that stays the same cannot explain a number that keeps moving. Race is the thing that stays constant while the figure lurches up and down, which is precisely what a non-cause looks like. Fuentes and Asmongold are pointing at the one variable that can't be doing the work and calling it the answer. So, what actually drives those numbers? Socioeconomic conditions, concentrated poverty across generations, no work, gutted schools, no wealth to fall back on, and neighbours too worn down or too transient to hold a street together. Criminologists have even given this a name: collective efficacy. Where it's strong, violence drops. Where decades of disinvestment have hollowed it out, violence climbs, regardless of who lives there. Socioeconomic conditions are a cope, says Asmongold. Even when you control for income, you get dramatically different racial crime rates. God, it'd be nice if this guy ever cited facts, figures, or sources for his bullshit, but I guess the grift wouldn't work if he did. His focus on income is the problem here. It's a snapshot. What landed in your account this month or this year. It says nothing about wealth, and the racial wealth gap dwarfs the income gap. In 2022, the SCF noted that white median household wealth in the United States is 6 times more than that of black people. It is the inevitable outcome from generations of redlining, denied mortgages, and inheritance that never came. Income also says nothing about the place. 2 men on identical salaries can live in completely different worlds. The Samson study is one of the most cited studies by criminologists because it found categorically that concentrated disadvantage and the collapse of community ties explained over 70% of the variation in violence. Not race. Control for income, Zach, and you've controlled for almost none of it. Right, next, IQ. Infamously, in 2026, Asmongold talked about how he doesn't want black people with low IQs emigrating to the United States, focusing on an IQ study undertaken in Nigeria and Somalia. Here's the problem with clutching IQ as your smoking gun. Even the man who built the first intelligence test didn't believe it did what these people claim. Alfred Binet said plainly it had a deceptive precision and that it did not measure a fixed inborn intelligence. A few modern philosophers assert that an individual's intelligence is a fixed quantity, he said, a quantity which cannot be increased. We must protest and react against this brutal pessimism. Treating the score as a permanent verdict on a person was a misuse of the thing. The founder of the IQ test thought the eugenicist reading of the IQ test was nonsense. You could even say it was a low IQ thing to think. Even if we ignore the Flint effect, statistical data that shows IQ relates to nurture, not nature, the specific numbers these people love are the shakiest of all. The specific report Asmongold clings to, intelligence, a unifying construct for the social sciences, is a scientific joke because it abandons the scientific method. Those national average IQ figures for African countries come from tiny, patchy samples at best. Some of them are just made up by inferring data from ethnically similar neighbors. It also conflates typical IQ tests with school achievement tests, so there's no standard method throughout. He would know this if he read it because the authors don't shy away from that. Last but not least, incompatible cultures. He's talked about a few, but seeing as it's topical, here's what he said about Palestinian people. I'm not going to cry a river when people who have genocide baked into their laws are getting genocided. I don't give a fuck. They're terrible people. It's not even a question. They are not the same as us. They come from an inferior culture. Palestinian Basic Law has acted as the interim constitution for Palestinian Authority since the end of the 20th century. What he's referencing there is the Hamas Charter, which is party guidance for a political platform, not laws that Palestinian people follow. Comparing the two is like saying 1920s USA was governed by the Ku Klux Klan's charter because some of its members were in government. Even if that was true, we've already covered how children are dying in Gaza right now, and last time I checked, Zach, kids don't make governing charters. You glaikit. Culture has also replaced race in the discourse to muddy the water. Asmongold has bought into Lee Atwater's frame of mind. Culture isn't a thing you can rank. It's millions of people disagreeing, changing, containing saints and monsters like everywhere else. Cultures aren't rungs on a ladder with the West on top. If you call one inferior, you've just mistaken your own vantage point for the summit. White nationalists want an ethno-state to protect their idea of culture, so let's take that to its logical conclusion. If we'd had a white ethno-state for the past 200 years, we wouldn't have smallpox vaccines, blood banks, gas masks, cataract surgery, the foundations of modern cardiac surgery, lithium-ion batteries that power basically every device that you own, the concept of skyscrapers, fiber optics, I don't want to be sitting here pitting poor black people and poor white people against each other like they're fucking specimens under a microscope, but unfortunately, we're now in a world where we have to meet the Bob Bag Brigade where it's at. Samewashing has led to people like Tucker Carlson or Piers Morgan platforming extremist beliefs, and now their talking points, as backwards as they are talking points we have to take seriously. The most valuable thing a fringe figure and a grifter can be given is legitimate debate. It's why the debate me bros are so prevalent. A debate gives the illusion that this is a normal guest at a normal table having a normal conversation. Even if their talking points have been so thoroughly debunked throughout history that we take it for granted and forget what the debunkers even said. Nick Fuentes spent years as exactly the kind of figure the mainstream wouldn't touch. Deplatformed, marginal, shouting into a live stream, and then in October 2025, Tucker Carlson, one of the most watched men in American conservative media, sat him down for a long, friendly, 2-hour interview. Just two guys at a table talking. Nothing Fuentes believes changed that day. What changed is that millions of people watched the most mainstream voice on the American right treat him like a peer. Then, a couple of months later, Piers Morgan did the same thing. He sat Fuentes down in a chair for the big confrontational interview, where the confrontation boiled down to, hey, see this hateful thing you said? That sure was hateful. And Fuentes flashes his creepy little smirk and says, yeah, it is. Which brings us, finally, to the biggest chair of all. Nothing's a bigger legitimizer than the seat of government.
We pledge to you that we will root out the communists, Marxists, fascists, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country. The threat from outside forces is far less sinister, dangerous, and grave than the threat from within.
Despite the rhetoric, Donald Trump is not a Nazi. American Nazis have weaponized Israel's genocide in Gaza to spew anti-Semitic bullshit. The US government sits opposite to that. Trump's not leading rallies with swastikas next to George Washington's face or cozying up at night with a copy of Mein Kampf, but he doesn't need to toss out Sieg Heils for us to draw a comparison. MAGA as a movement follows the blood and soil rhetoric that Wolfenstein the New Colossus explored. Not all Trump supporters are Nazis, but the Nazis sure thought he was one of theirs during his rise. Trump awakened a lot of people to the issues we've been raising for years, Henry Stout, founder of the Aryan Freedom Network, said in 2025. He's the best thing that's happened to us. While his administration mutters disapprovingly, so quiet that we can barely hear them over the dog whistles, they're using rhetoric and writing policy that keeps attracting them. Often, that's through sanewashing to bring in the normies. The White House's social media has adopted an edgy, memified communication style. The government wraps cruelty in a joke, something that enables sanewashing. Other times, they go full mask off. Right now, the United States government has a webpage titled They Walk Among Us, where glowing green font compares illegal immigrants to aliens. A paragraph reads, if you've witnessed an alien abduction, do not be alarmed. The alien is in good hands. We will take care of it and return it safely to its place of origin. It. Fucking Nazi shit. The administration is, at the time of this video, trying to redefine who is a citizen of the United States and who isn't. If you watched my other videos, you'll know that that's precisely what the Nazis did with the Nuremberg laws. Masked, plainclothes agents are making arrests without warrants. As several historians have noted, that is quite literally how the Gestapo started. They were originally an agency that operated outside judicial oversight, used protective custody without recourse, and relied on euphemism to bypass due process. Take Rameza Ozturk, a PhD student, a Fulbright scholar, grabbed off a street in Massachusetts in 2025 by 6 masked agents, shipped 1,500 miles to a detention center in Louisiana before her own lawyers could find her, held for 6 weeks, and charged with no crime. Detention centers were always in America. That is not a Trump-specific thing. Every president has pushed deportation. It might as well be an asterisk on the Statue of Liberty by this point. However, what the US government has done is expand deportations to people without a criminal record. According to Track, over 70% of people detained have no criminal conviction, and that includes families, children. By definition, these are concentration camps. Not death camps, the distinction is important, but they are semantically, historically, and practically camps built for the mass detention of civilians based on group identity, excluding protections normally afforded by a country's legal system. That's not my definition, it's Andrea Pitzer's, a historian who has written extensively about concentration camps. ICE detention is civil, not criminal. It passed 70,000 people in 2026, none of them serving a sentence. The legal basis is immigration status, not race. But the detained population is overwhelmingly brown, and courts have found agents stopping people based on race. So, in practice, it's enforced by appearance. It's also built to sit outside normal legal protections. No right to a lawyer, little judicial review. The Trump administration has also cozied up to white supremacists and Nazi sympathizers. Stephen Miller, the architect of his immigration agenda, regularly pushed literature beloved by neo-Nazis. He's drizzled the Great Replacement theory into the White House, though ironically, that is the most American thing about him. Roosevelt loved to bang on about migrant birth rates, echoing the term race suicide coined by Edward Ross, an American sociologist. Madison Grant's The Passing of the Great Race is an American text that rambles on about the dilution of superior Nordic stocks. Even when Trump has tried to distance himself from people like David Duke, a former Grand Wizard of the KKK, these people have glommed onto him. But recently, in the wake of his support for Israel, something has changed. Even though his rhetoric and appointment normalized what they're saying, Nazis don't think he's one of them anymore. The Infighting has looked up, rightfully, at those in charge. One thing a lot of people can and do agree on is Donald Trump fucking sucks. Normal folks hate that he bombed Iran. Normal folks hate that he's helping Israel wage a war. These are two actions specifically that connects the alt-right to everyone else because they hate it too. They sell different reasons for hating it, but Trump's platform means being critical of him is now an entry point to what white nationalists are selling. Despising Trump, frankly, is an international feeling. It's why people like me, who aren't American, pay such close attention to the United States. Newsflash, Blue Gaming Rage, I don't want to talk about Trump, but the actions of the White House keep spurting into my country, my politics, and my comment section, so I am forced to take notice and interrogate what he's doing. Now, can we please get back to Wolfenstein Youngblood?
Okay, are we talking about Trump here?
During the marketing cycle of Wolfenstein the New Colossus, Machine Games stated repeatedly that when they wrote the game, they weren't thinking about the rise of Trump. While I believe that, games take ages to make, and I pointed out in my video in the game that it doesn't need Trump to execute its point, Bethesda's marketing still caught some flack. Trump supporters were pissed that trailers poked at MAGA with the statement, "Make America Nazi-free again." Oh, a Trump joke, Captain Skeleton commented below a video with those slogans. Because the subtext is advocating murder of Trump supporters. Pretty funny, devs. Cool, didn't know Bethesda teamed with SJWs and Antifa, Levi DeRosier tweeted. For those of you new to this cycle of bullshit, SJWs is what people used to say instead of woke. Ian Miles Chong took a break from ranting about how headphones are making you gay to write on the Daily Caller. Wolfenstein 2, The New Colossus, references current politics and indicts President Trump for his supposed association with the alt-right. A baseless claim often touted by the liberal media. Wolfenstein Youngblood has a more direct reference. We can find a publisher's rejection letter to a Herr Triton who has sent them a manuscript about a great wall built around Germany and a conman elected leader of the Reich. Aryan House Publishing rejects this manuscript because they think it's too outlandish. This is clearly a jab at Donald Trump and everything that he represents. The people who got angry about jokes like that one, the Bethesda teamed up with SJWs crowd, weren't necessarily Nazis. They were just gamers who'd been told over and over that their hobby was broken and under attack by the other. They were told this by people who, frankly, care more about their own agenda than the hobby itself. Grifters understand that you don't recruit anyone by opening with the swastika. You open with the thing they already love, and you tell them it's being taken away. It's a documented strategy with a name, Entryism. It's when a fringe group infiltrates a larger, more mainstream body and hijacks it. The far right has gotten frighteningly good at it, and Youngblood even has a strong, fictional example.
So, with the main computers of all the Nazi towers act, we have complete control over the information flow between Paris and Berlin.
Jess and Soph destroy the three brothers. Abby does a hack attack and finds out where Lab X is. Juju is excited. She lathers the girls with compliments, wine and jokes, and toasts to their father's health. The wine was drugged. Youngblood's big twist is revealed. Juju is a French aristocrat who sided with the Nazis. Her second-in-command, Jacques, is actually General Brandt in disguise. The two infiltrated the resistance and tricked the girls into destroying the brothers. Brandt didn't want the old Reich to get their hands on his work. The Jacques Brandt twist would be half decent if he'd had any characterization prior to the reveal. He was just a scarred, mute man who was in one cutscene and then floated around Resistance HQ. The twist is a surprise, but it isn't meaningful. We chase Juju and Brandt out of the catacombs. Abby gets a knife in the eye, and afterwards the Resistance just shrugs it off like nothing happened. Give young girls wine, cigarettes, and adventure, and they'll believe anything, Juju says. Why does that sound so familiar? These guys, these rootless white males, had monster power, Steve Bannon, Trump's chief strategist, said in 2017. You can activate that army. They come in through Gamergate or whatever, and then get turned onto politics and Trump. Bannon weaponized a demographic of gamers to serve the alt-right. By his own admission, he mobilized some of his pundits, specifically Milo Yiannopoulos, to pretend they care about gaming while stirring the pot. Just a year earlier, Yiannopoulos was writing that, quote, "There's something a bit tragic, isn't there, about men in their 30s hunched over a controller whacking a helmeted extraterrestrial. I'm in my late 20s and even I find it sad, and yet there are so many of them, enough to support a multi-billion-dollar video games industry. That's an awful lot of unemployed saddos living in their parents' basements." Ah, the Grift awakened. Stick articles about Gamergate next to articles about Trump, political correctness, Muslims and Mexicans, and a pipeline manifests. Bannon was onto something, and in the years since, we see his ideas pop up more and more, just with the language tweaked. Political correctness turned into SJWs, which transformed again into woke. Tip: don't buy Wokenstein Youngblood, writes Trump Goat POTUS on Steam.
American Krogan does in 16 minutes what Xander can't do in hours. Understand what the game is, and the extremely ignorant and jarring message it really implies.
Reese4077 comments on my new Colossus video. American Krogan made 2 videos on Wolfenstein. The Problem with Wolfenstein, where he talks about the new Colossus, and his Youngblood video called, Wokenstein.
Perhaps putting Mrs. 50% of crime in charge of the FBI after liberating America from the Germans wasn't such a stellar idea. This set of twins might as well be a lesbian couple, seeing how one is extremely girly and the other is an over-the-top tomboy. Those silly goyim and their small brains could never be responsible for a moon base.
There's overlap between what I and Krogan covered. In our coverage of Wolfenstein, we both touched on the cruelty of allied countries before and during World War II. Except Krogan doesn't use that historical hypocrisy to flag how white supremacists weren't just German, or how the Nazis pulled from American legislation to form their legal framework. Instead, he uses it to raise up the Nazis. Quote, "Now, in case you're not familiar with the previous 2 games, the cause of extremely advanced technology isn't due to German ingenuity. Oh no, those silly goyim and their small brains could never be responsible for a moon base. Nope, you see, those deceitful Germans stole all their technology from an ancient mystical order of kosher scientists called the Dat Yeshud. Machine Games just had to deprive the Germans of any credit of having made significant technological advancements in the 1930s and 40s. If we admit any of this, then it would follow, reasonably so, that there is something unique and special about Germans worthy of preservation. And perhaps we ought to stop enforcing a de facto extension of Theodor Kaufmann's plans to genocide them through mass immigration collective and miscegenation. A few things on this. The Dat Yeshud isn't a mystical order of kosher scientists. Why are you just saying Jewish, Krogan? The joke isn't nearly strong enough to justify the dog whistle. The new Colossus states, textually, that anyone can join the Dat Yeshud, that it predates modern religion, and that it likely comes from the Sumerians. Yes, the name being Hebrew makes that a retcon, but it's still clarified clearly in the games that Krogan claims to care about. Second, Wolfenstein, as a franchise, has almost always taken World War II stuff and smashed it into ancient mysticism. All Machine Games did was carry that forward, but with a sci-fi aesthetic. There is only one way to include that idea and give all credit to the Nazis, by making the ancient mystical society Aryan in nature. Why would Machine Games possibly do that? All that choice would do is reinforce the idea that they are a master race. Third, why are you mentioning Theodor Kaufmann like he was some sincere high-ranking Jew with official standing? He was an angry, fringe, eccentric figure who published a pamphlet in 1941 responding to what Nazis were doing to Jews in Europe. That pamphlet sold poorly and had zero influence on Allied policy. It had all the importance of my dad tweeting during a war. Its actual historical importance is almost entirely as Nazi propaganda material. Joseph Goebbels discovered this obscure pamphlet and inflated it into supposed proof of a global Jewish plan to exterminate Germans. It's a weird thing to add, and an even weirder thing to build a life view from. Oh, and while we're at it, this...
Paris is a mess, and London now has a majority foreign-born population, and the most popular boy's name was recently found to be Mohammed.
Is just wrong. Your example is factually, empirically, categorically wrong. According to Trust for London, the foreign-born population is at most 41%, something you would expect for a capital city that economically acts like its own country and encourages vast amounts of foreign investment. You're just peddling a conspiracy that Eva Vlardingerbroek ranted about at a conservative conference in Hungary. Expand that statistic to the rest of the UK, and the UK population is, at most, 19% foreign-born. Why are you picking on a city to make a point about a country? American Krogan's channel got banned a few years ago, and when he finally came back, his announcement immediately had echoes of Bannon's pipeline. Quote, I still believe the video game medium is rather important in terms of metapolitics. That is, influencing culture and society. But it's an extremely time-consuming endeavor to do the kind of work I did, especially considering how little financial remuneration I got. Ah, Grift 2, Revenge of the Grift! Funny that a guy who gets core details wrong about a game series still made videos about its politics simply because he thinks they can influence culture and society. Funny that he claims videos full of rhetoric where he twists half-baked facts and outright lies are a time-consuming endeavor that needs money to continue. Hate to break it to you, Krogan, but barely anyone's making a living on video essays. I certainly don't. But essays still get made because people like talking about things they're passionate about. Krogan embodies a wider issue. In 2018, Robert Evans released a study called From Memes to Infowars: How 75 Fascist Activists Were Red-Pilled. In it, Evans notes that YouTube was cited most as an entry point. It's been diluted with this glop and is statistically dangerous. To quote Seb Lowe, everything we love, it turns to rat shit. The quality of conversation around games dips every time someone zones in on DEI, wokeness, sweet baby ink, or whatever new unimportant thing is called important. Woke is the cinema sins of dog whistling. It's snooze fest analysis. If Bannon's army of monster power actually focused on stuff that matters, maybe we wouldn't be entering an all-digital future or watching as AI breaks the industry so thoroughly that consoles are going to double their price next generation. Instead, discourse is flooded with this inane entryism bullshit. Okay, so where Krogan and I do agree, though, is in the game's use of co-op. What's that? He doesn't talk about co-op. Well, that's a weird thing not to mention when analyzing a co-op shooter. Jerk Gustafsson told serial killers, everything is a consequence of going co-op. Weapons are a good example. There's a lot of focus on upgrades and customizing your weapons so you can find a playstyle to fit playing with someone else. If everything is a consequence of going co-op, it's important to consider the quality of that co-op. Thankfully, one of the mods in my Discord, Mr. Alienated, was happy to suffer so I could break down Youngblood's true experience. Follow him on TikTok, he's at Mitchell and always gives me a giggle. Or don't, the Nazis lost the war, so it's a free country. In a critique this negative, you might be surprised to learn that Youngblood's co-op is quite good, mainly because it's so reflexive to your settings. A maxed out player doesn't get nerfed if they join an early game player. I got to swing around Mitchell with my wonder weapons and show off for a bit, made me feel like a big man. Youngblood has a pep system that lets you heal your teammates and summon ammo from the ether. You could throw a thumbs up to your pal in the middle of a fight. It's mechanically useful with a cooldown that's forgiving and unlikely to be abused, but it also turns Jess and Soph's relationship into a gameplay mechanic. They might be thin characters, but it's a charming idea and well balanced. What isn't balanced, though, is co-op gameplay. Here's the boss from Brother 2. And that was the boss from Brother 2. In single player, this thing kicked my ass. As the fight progresses, it spawns spongy super soldiers that put too much pressure on you, so a boss that wants you to hone in forces you to run around like a blue-arsed fly. In co-op, we sent Brother 2 into space before he could introduce himself. The ping system is as useful as an inflatable dartboard. Unfortunately for Youngblood, Apex Legends released 5 months earlier, a game that revolutionized how voiceless communication can work in a co-op game. That means that the tagging system we get here looks archaic. You can only tag one enemy at a time, something that is useless if you're trying to scope out a large arena. Tagging is a feature that would massively benefit Wolfenstein's stealth, and hopefully one day we'll see it implemented, but it might as well not be here. When Dirk Gustafsson said everything is a consequence of co-op, he meant it. That includes level design too. Transitionary doors are everywhere that fracture spaces out so both you and your partner can keep regrouping. Levels like the Zeppelin keep splitting off into parallel corridors so you can separate and interlock. It means you don't feel like you're tripping over each other. Sometimes there are doors that need one of you to grab a nearby code. One player heads over to a console to generate that code while the other waits at the door to punch it in. These aren't puzzles, in fact they're completely frictionless, but it offers an opportunity to work together that doesn't just involve Nazi killing. The headline is that Youngblood's co-op is quite good. It's just a shame that everything else surrounding it is so rubbish. If gunplay felt better, if the story was interesting, if the mission design rewarded the level design and the world didn't feel static and repetitive, it'd be easier to find the gold in its partnership systems, but none of that is true. And when you play in single player, the game design curdles. Jess and Soph share 3 lives. That means if your AI partner gets downed and uses up all your lives, the mission fails. You must keep them alive. That's a problem because the AI has a death wish. Sometimes in large arenas, Jess wouldn't follow me, so she'd be bleeding out on the other side of town while I'm safe and snug at the next mission objective because I didn't want to fight the same group of Nazis for the 15th time. The Brother 1 boss fight is designed explicitly for co-op, and the AI does not compensate. There are 2 floors, and intermittently, a laser grid will appear on one floor before swapping to the second. Jess didn't understand that she had to keep jumping between floors, so she just tanked damage and got downed. That meant I had to keep running over to bring her back to life, even though I'm crouching in lasers to do so. This is the closest I've ever come to rage quitting a game. We can't change AI behavior to give a preferred weapon or make our partner less aggressive. That meant I was stuck with a Jess that would just teleport in front of me like a goddamn jump scare during big fights, blocking my shots. "Whoa," she'd yell, "take a look at this, Soph," pointing to a computer I've already interacted with, or an empty spot on a desk where an hour before I picked up a collectible on a past side mission. It feels like only a handful of barks were recorded, and because the game is so stretched, you will hear each one a couple dozen times. When Eurogamer got to preview the game, Andreas Ogefor said, "It's difficult to make AI partners in games, and I think we had 3 goals. She should never be annoying, she should actually contribute, and she should feel like a person." Sorry, Andreas, but after 2 playthroughs, Youngblood is 0 for 3.
What the?
Daddy?
Oh my god. Is this real? My babies.
The Nazis have been hiding Lab X in plain sight all along. It's under the reconstructed Eiffel Tower. Juju and Brandt retreat there, and the girl's plan is simple. Find Dad, gear up, and hunt some Nazis. At the bottom of Lab X, we find BJ. Obsidian pillars reach up into abyssal darkness, showing us that Brandt's research facility was built in an old That You Should vault. BJ came here because, after he killed Hitler, he was cursed with nightmares and sought answers. See, Hitler had a dead man switch, a doomsday device that would activate when he dies. It would trigger a global climate catastrophe that would sweep away civilizations. If he couldn't rule the world, nobody could. In the new Colossus, I talked about how Wolfenstein pulls inspiration from the man in the high castle. Youngblood decides that inspiration's for nerds, plagiarism is better. Using a That You Should artifact called the God Key, BJ has glimpsed into other worlds, and in those worlds, the Nazis lose the war. This is exactly what's hinted at in High Castle's book and what drives the narrative in High Castle's TV show. That's right, baby, we're doing the multiverse. Knowing that the end of days is coming, BJ is trying to enter those other worlds. We don't learn what his intentions are, but it's loosely implied that he wants to take his friends and family, abandon his life, and escape into another universe. Whatever's in that other dimension, Jess says, You live in this one, and we're gonna make sure it's worth living in. Here's hoping, Jess, because dumping the revolution to run off into the multiverse is creatively bankrupt and undermines the emotion of the past 2 games. Machine Games, if you're listening, we can all act like this never happened and chalk it up to a Freedom Chronicles story. There's still time. None of this justifies BJ abandoning his family at the start of the game. None of it is so convincingly enough for me to even understand BJ's logic. Anya knew about the GOG key because Set had it back in the new Colossus. BJ didn't even have a plan when he left, which is on brand because he's never been much of a planner, but it makes his actions even more incomprehensible. BJ Blazkowicz, a man whose American dream could be boiled down to the word family, ditched his family so that he could sit in a lab and fiddle with an artifact like he's solving a Rubik's Cube. The girl set off to kill Brandt while BJ covers the rear. Juju dies, as a joke, in a cutscene, Soph accidentally crushes her with an elevator. The game's lost all goodwill by this point, so Brandt's boss fight needs to be something special if it's going to claw me back. It isn't. This fight is a cacophony of noise. It's 2 phases with no checkpoints between them. At one point, I got stuck in a wall after kicking Brandt's ass, so had to restart. Look at these confused Nazis trying to hit me. In phase 2, he brings in backup to waste your ammo. The amount it takes to kill these enemies is not returned by whatever you loot off their bodies. He calls in air support to rain rockets down so you can't see shit. He flies around like a gnat, and you can only hurt him by shooting his jetpack, meaning that you have to rely on another player. One of you gets his attention, the other shoots him in the ass, but quelle surprise, the AI does not compensate.
What happens now?
Juju and Lothar's Fourth Reich pals in Berlin will come down hard on this city.
We'll be here waiting for him.
Good. Meantime, you sisters up for a job?
Brandt's death should herald an emotional reunion for the Blazkowicz family, but instead, our closing beats are dedicated to teasing live service missions in the future. After hours of barely any story, Youngblood wheels in BJ to deliver the mother of all lore dumps and then rolls credits. Hitler's doomsday device is unresolved. The storm will come. Jess, Soph, and Abby are told that they need to take back Paris and secure some Nazi tech to prepare for the apocalypse. The game doesn't resolve its core bit of plot, purely so we can keep playing forever. It's a black hole curated to swallow up your time. In fact, more mind-numbing side missions open up after the credits, demanding we return to Lab X. Grift 3, The Rise of the Grift. Just like its fetid live service family, Wolfenstein Youngblood has microtransactions. No longer are you finding gold bars in the world, now you buy them. Gold gets you cosmetics and skins, nearly all of which you can also unlock with silver coins, just at a robbery of a price. Youngblood does that insidious shit where you need to buy packs of in-game currency, even though the individual cosmetics cost pennies. At launch, Kotaku pointed out that as microtransactions go, these are unintrusive. That is true, but to focus on that side of things is disingenuous. Youngblood isn't free to play, you already bought the game. Carving out a chunk, any chunk, however cosmetic or skippable, and selling it back to you after you've bought it is always worth criticism. Focusing on how intrusive this is like praising a pickpocket for having soft hands. It wasn't even cosmetic only, not at launch. On PS4, for a few days, you could spend real money on boosters. Max health, ammo, XP, but Bethesda saw the blowback and patched it out. That was a mask-off moment, but the game design is evidence enough that this was originally the long-term plan. You don't build the plumbing for a real money pay-to-win economy by accident. Somebody, early in development, designed this game around those boosters, around the assumption that you'd hit a wall and pay to climb it. Bethesda might have backtracked on pay to win, but you can't backtrack central game design. To make somebody even want a level up faster booster, you first build a game that is slow on purpose. The grind, the level gating, the spongy Nazis, the attrition, all of it manufactures the itch the store was built to scratch. Youngblood is a game whose entire skeleton was engineered for retention and never for fun. It's cursed with the same problems as Redfall, a game that also scrubbed pay-to-win purchases but carried the stain of a game designed to encourage them. Grifting doesn't start with your wallet. People think the con man's first move is the ask, but no, the first move is keeping you playing, keeping you in the room. Meet the Hammerskins, an international neo-Nazi group that peaked in the 1990s but is still active today. Their main source of income was music. Back before streaming, hate music was $1 million business. Streaming and piracy smashed into the music industry, and as a result, music publishers like Resistance Records or Panzerfaust got decimated. Nowadays, the Hammerskins are a shell of their former selves. One of the few positives of streaming is that it made their grift unsustainable. Despite that, it was a powerful recruitment tool. You buy records and go to concerts. If you're a fan of Nazi bands like Screwdriver, there was an associated sunk cost that kept you swimming in their messaging. That music, typically, was apocalyptic to make the movement seem more important than it really was. In the song White Power, we get lyrics like, "Well, if we don't win our battle and all does not go well, it's apocalypse for Britain, and we'll see you all in hell." To the mind of the white supremacist, the apocalypse is always coming. Hitler peddled it in his 1939 Reichstag speech, calling himself a prophet. In the 70s, William Luther Pierce released The Turner Diaries, a novel peddled by Nazis that described the death of the white race. The 80s brought David Lane's infamous 14 words. "We must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children." He thought the white race was a decade out from dying. A decade later, Pat Buchanan warned that this year is our last chance to save our republic before she disappears into the godless new world order that our elites are constructing. Then, 12 years later, Renaud Camus released The Great Replacement in 2011, rebranding apparent extinction as a demographic inevitability, calling it genocide by substitution. The grifter needs doomsday to stay imminent and never arrive, because the ongoing panic is the product. It creates a sense of urgency, of bleak FOMO. Some of them claim to be accelerationists, people who want a race war or want to burn a multicultural country to the ground just to rebuild. But I think it's more cynical than that. The replacement must always be about to happen, like preppers predicting the rapture. The business model and the ideology require the same thing, a crisis that never concludes. It's the only way you make someone pay attention. Interestingly, grifters are now being called out by true believers. Brad Griffin, a white nationalist who thinks free speech is for naive college students, wrote, "By the alt-right, I am referring to Breitbart, the Milo Yiannopoulos phenomenon, Paul Joseph Watson and InfoWars, Mike Chernovich and a few other people. A few years ago, none of these people were around. They certainly weren't nationalists. They saw that our movement was steadily gaining ground and opportunistically hopped on the bandwagon. We've always known this would be a problem once we hit critical mass. The real grifter doesn't open with $100 a month. He opens with a joke that you're allowed to laugh at, or a community glad you showed up, an enemy who explains why your life feels the way it feels. They open with retention. It's only after you're captured that the machine turns around and starts charging." Nick Fuentes is the king of grift.
Check out our merch store. We have a brand new Black Friday merch haul.
Oh, 1 second. Let me just...
It's $15 a month. You get access.
Jesus Christ, he's still going? America First is Fuentes' own platform. He built it after being deplatformed from everywhere else, so he owns the toll booth. Watching him live is free, but the replays, only the most recent handful of episodes are up for nothing. Everything older slides behind the subscription wall. His entire back catalogue is monetized, and a chunk of his older stuff is not on the free platform Rumble. Keyword searching his videos, the thing good faith journalists, researchers, and critics would want to do so they can use a primary source, is $30 a month. To hold Nick Fuentes to account, you have to pay Nick Fuentes. The tiers climb from there, up to $100 a month. That gets you added to a private group chat. Nick Fuentes has harnessed Steve Bannon's army of lonely white men and is selling them friendship. He spent the retention to build the crowd. Now he charges them rent to feel close to him. Retention first, money second, and now his friends are in my goddamn comment section. For some reason, I found myself getting more disgusted, more angry, and more despairing with this video than I did writing the New Order and the New Colossus. As we come to an end, I think I've realized that there are 3 reasons for that. The first is that naturally, it's more comforting to focus on history, because even if you see present-day parallels, everything you're talking about happened decades ago. The second is that it is exhausting to be faced with a waterfall of conspiracies and ass-pull statistics, especially if your intention is to take them seriously and fact-check them. Look into the abyss for long enough and the abyss looks back. The third is that everywhere you look, you see purposeful, intentional stupidity. Clearly, it is part of the strategy. Dumb the conversation down so fundamentally and your opponent just gives up. Nothing can fix that, and the more I read through my comment section, the more I realized that it's not my responsibility. I love misinformation. Robo Trash Panda commented on my New Order video, a video that detailed its sources to the point I worried I was just regurgitating stuff Nazis said. The worst part is that even if you do all of it, read the books, chase the citations, build a case, it still won't land, because they decided in advance that it can't. Don't take my word for it, here's Richard Spencer, a man this movement once called an intellectual. This idea that I should throw facts at you all or quote things, I just find that a little bit lame, to be honest. We could throw facts at each other all day long, but at the end of the day, a fact only has meaning because of the perspective looking on it. There is no fact that you can cite that will destroy identity or make it irrelevant. Facts are lame. Facts are lame. Spencer's a man who would regularly lecture and preach on white nationalism. He would invite people to ask questions or debate his points, and whenever they brought statistics or facts that countered his bias, he just shrugged and said facts don't matter. The whole apparatus is built to be immune to the one thing we can bring to it. You don't win this with a bibliography, but with that in mind, let's do some arithmetic. Goyslop is one word, 7 letters if you're counting, and I am. It took whoever typed it somewhere to the region of a second and a half. It cost them nothing. No research, no reading, no thought, no risk. They didn't even have to believe it. They typed a word, they got their little hit of transgression, and then presumably their mum called them down for dinner. Now, let's price up the other side of the exchange. To answer them properly, with sources, the way you lot rightly demand in the comments, I read Alfred Rosenberg's Myth of the 20th Century. 500 pages of a man doing a bad impression of a philosopher, annotated by a modern Holocaust denier who kept interrupting to rant about race mixing in America. I read Hitler, I read Himmler, I read Blavatsky and Guido von List. I read about Joseph Mengele until I had to put the notes down and go for a walk. I read Vegas Tennell's years inside the American far right. I joined extremist Telegram groups to see what was shared, and I sat with a survivor's testimony about a little girl in a red coat getting smaller and smaller until I could get the paragraph right. Because if I'm going to put that in front of you, I'd better get it right. 2 videos, something like 4 hours of finished script, months of reading, cross-checking, chasing citations, and rewriting the same chapter 6 times. 1.5 seconds versus months. There's a name for this. It's called Brandolini's Law. The energy needed to refute nonsense is an order of magnitude greater than the energy needed to produce it. 10 times the work minimum, just to get back to 0, just to arrive at nothing said. But there is plenty to say. Sometimes grifters just reinforce bias, but they also hijack legitimate grievance. Go to the towns where the factories left or the mines dried up, and you'll see communities that have been robbed of future and hope. The wealth gap globally is obscene. Opportunities are gone. When a man in a Rust Belt, regardless of country, tells you the system abandoned him, he is not lying. There's a difference between a sad teenager or a lonely guy who got funneled in because a streamer was the first voice to make him feel like he mattered, and the grown man who has read the 14 words and nodded along. One is being used, the other has picked up the tool. Understanding how the machine caught someone is not the same as excusing what they do once it has them. He can be a victim of the con and still be responsible for the damage he does inside it. That legitimate, righteous, blood-boiling anger is all the grifter needs. Raw anger is just fuel. It doesn't come with a target attached, so the grifter attaches one for you and spins class struggle into racial struggle. That is grievance hijacking. Instead of you're poor because 40 years of policy gutted your town to fatten shareholders, the grifter leans in and offers something easier. You're poor because you're white. You're losing because they're winning. It's the immigrants, it's the Muslims, it's the Jews and the woke. The billionaire stays cozy. The grievance gets spent on a phantom. The grifter doesn't even respect the people he's farming. He needs them desperate, angry, loyal, and privately he thinks that they're livestock. Here's what right-winger Kevin Williamson wrote in National Review. The truth about these dysfunctional, downscale communities is that they deserve to die. Economically, they are negative assets. Morally, they are indefensible. Forget all your cheap, theatrical Bruce Springsteen crap. Forget about your sanctimony about struggling Rust Belt factory towns and your conspiracy theories about the wily Orientals stealing our jobs. The white American underclass is enthralled to a vicious, selfish culture whose main products are misery and a used heroin needle. Donald Trump's speeches make them feel good. So does OxyContin. This guy is a conservative. He is writing about his own base. Fuentes insults his own chat. Williamson writes their eulogy. The Grift despises its marks. And if by some miracle any of those marks are still watching, here's the reality. The sacred endangered white race that the Nazis, the Klan, and the Grift is built around is a story that keeps rewriting itself. A century ago, the Irish weren't white. Italians weren't white. Half the people waving the flag today would have been turned away at the door of their own movement. There is no white culture dying. There's your grand's cooking and your town and the songs you grew up on, and none of that is white. It's yours. It's specific and human. They demand a future for white children, but a child's future has nothing to do with the melanin in their skin. Take it from a father. A kid needs a warm house, a full belly, and a reason to hope, and not one of those things is racial. You could hand every white child on earth the perfect life, and the ideology would be no closer to satisfy because it was never about the children. It was about the enemy. Strip it all the way back, and the punchline is almost unbearable. There's more genetic variation between two random blokes at the same rally than between the whole categories they would kill over. The race they're terrified of losing was never real enough to lose. It is real. I'm Norse. I'm Aryan. I'm a Viking. No, you're not. Maybe your ancestry can be traced back to Iceland, but you're not a goddamn Viking the same way I'm not a goddamn Pict. You are paying a stranger $100 a month to be your friend. You are using face filters to throw racial slurs at kids. You are screaming that a video game retrospective is part of a Jewish conspiracy. We are, every one of us, the same nervous species of jumped up ape telling stories in the dark so we feel less alone. But one thing's for certain. The next story that you tell will be better than Wolfenstein Youngblood. Like and subscribe!
Well, evil said the stupid, you look like you could use a friend. And stupid says, that's great, I ain't never had me one of them. Then stupid said that evil, how does this friendship work? And evil says it's easy, you just stick your head down in the dirt. So stupid dug a hole and stuck his head down in the sand. And evil had free rein to carry out his wicked plans. Saw that stupid was truly stupid, and he had time to tear the world apart and split the people into tribes. He said that war can have a winner, and that greed is not a sin, and that man can judge another man by the color of his skin. And all the while stupid sat while the world burned to the ground, thinking, gee, well, ain't it nice to have fun around? Up his eyes one day and he saw that he'd been tricked. The rich had all grown richer while the poor all took a hit. And his friends were all in jail and he lost all of his rights. And the people were divided and the earth wasn't even fit for life. And he wanted to go back, but by then it was too late, because stupid followed evil and there was nowhere to escape. Stupid followed evil and there was nowhere to escape.